Hello guys, this is your friend and we are back with a new fanfic. And if you enjoy this fanfic, then please press the like button and subscribe to my channel for more fanfic like this. And now let's start the fanfic.
What if Naruto returned from Limbo with Tsunade and built a harem with Mikoto, Tsume, Shizune, Part 2. Cage Booth. Bachan, why hasn't Ojiazan attacked yet? Toka impatiently asked, turning to her grandmother who sat beside her, having grown tired of waiting for the epic battle to begin as the six ninjas stood staring at each other for what had felt like ages to Toka, though in actuality had only been a couple of minutes. They're waiting for the right moment to begin, Tsunade explained, further confusing Toka, who thought the right moment was the second the protractor said begin. Just like she always did with her academy spars, attacking the instant Uruka said, "Hajime." "I don't understand, Bachan," Toka told her grandmother, earning a smile from Tsunade, who suspected someone as young and inexperienced as her wouldn't. "I'll explain later," Tsunade promised, knowing she would when she and Naruto began the girls' training. "But for now watch," Tsunade said, gesturing with her head at the fight, sensing it was about to begin. Sighing, Toka turned her head back to the six individuals who still hadn't moved, causing her to shift agitatedly in her seat as she wondered when her Ojiazan was going to start kicking. Arena. Naruto calmly shifted his weight as he watched the five shinobi across from him, gauging their skill as he looked at their appearance, trying to learn as much about them as he could before they began. Starting from the left with the spandex-wearing man, Naruto briefly thought he was back in the past as he looked at the Maida-Dai lookalike. He could tell from the man's incredibly muscular physique that just like Dai, this man had gone through a lot of physical training even by shinobi standards, making him a dangerous man to fight in close combat just like Dai had been. "I will have to watch out for him," Naruto noted as he recalled Dai's passion for taijutsu and his great skill at it. Wondering if the man who he suspected was his son also had the same level of skill for it before turning to the next man and nearly gasping as he wondered if he was truly in the past. Shiroi Kiba, White Fang, Naruto briefly shocked, thought as he stared at the next man who bared great resemblance to a shinobi he once knew, Tsukumo Hatake. Before instantly brushing it aside as he realized there was no way this man was Tsukumo. Tsukumo had died years before if what he remembered from viewing Tsunade's life was accurate. And even if he hadn't, the man would be far older and would definitely not have the laid-back look Naruto could see, Tsukumo having always been a serious type. Looking at the Junin now, Naruto made a mental note to watch out for him since he was clearly Tsukumo's son and had a Sharingan, that combo making him someone he needed to look out for. Sharingan, Naruto thought in great interest as he glanced over at the next person, who was obviously an Uchiha, judging by the woman's very Uchiha-like looks and the small clan crest on the front of her Junin vest, making her a natural-born user of the dojutsu unlike Tsukumo's son, which meant she was probably a far more advanced user of the eye. But that didn't deeply worry Naruto since he knew how to fight the dojutsu and take advantage of its weaknesses, having trained since he heard about it from his mother and father at a young age. What did, however, slightly bother him was the katana in her right hand, telling him she was at least capable in the field, and that worried him since kenjutsu was never his thing, and combined with the Sharingan that could end up being problematic. However, his superior speed was usually enough to easily overwhelm most kenjutsu users. Sharingan, Naruto thought again, this time in irritation as he looked at the next woman who also had red eyes, wondering if his sensei had pitted him against the three to irk him since his senju side always had a natural dislike for the dojutsu. No Tomo, Naruto thought, frowning as he stared closer at the woman before realizing that her eyes were in fact not the dojutsu but simply a rare eye color. Since he knew it was impossible for the Sharingan to have no Tomo. Looking her over, Naruto failed to pick up anything that gave him an idea of her skills. So sighing, Naruto decided to move to the next and final opponent. Nothing, Naruto thought as he failed to pick anything about the final person before him. But seeing the hard look in her brown pupilless eyes that only an experienced shinobi, or in this case an experienced kunoichi, had, Naruto knew like all his opponents he had to take her seriously and not underestimate her. Sighing, Naruto knew that his sensei wanted him to put on a show for the spectators, and that wouldn't happen if he went all out and brutally attacked his opponents. So humming to himself, Naruto formulated a plan that would allow him to not only put on a show but also properly gauge the skills of Dai and Tsukumo's sons, but firstly Naruto needed to separate them if he was going to hold back against 5 formidable opponents. So retrieving a single kunai, Naruto threw it forward at an incredible speed, signaling to the spectators that the spar had finally began as he carried out his plan, swiftly beginning a short chain of hand seals before ending on the boar sign as he whispered, "Kunai Kage Bunshin no Jutsu, Kunai Shadow Clone Jutsu." Multiply 1 kunai to 300, much to the awe of the younger audience watching. Shit, Kakashi cursed watching the incoming kunai as he realized exactly what the Yonin was doing. Separating them for the picking, making them much weaker than they would be if they attacked as a team together. Seeing his plan work as the 5 shinobi moved apart, Naruto shifted his hands into a familiar cross-hand sign. Whispering, "Kage Bushin no Jutsu, Shadow Clone Jutsu," as 5 clones each popped into existence around him before sending them each towards an opponent as he hung back waiting to fight whoever managed to defeat his clones. Kurenai vs. Clone. Megan. Jubaku Satsu, Demon Illusion. Tree Binding Death, Kurenai called out, watching the Yonin clone fastly approach as she waited for her technique to take effect. Before widening her eyes as she gasped in shock as the illusion shattered the instant she cast it. Interesting, a genjutsu user, clone Naruto thought to himself, filing away the first information he had of the attractive red-eyed woman as he rapidly approached her. Having instantly recognized her illusion and reflexively broken it like he did with most genjutsu, just as his mother Toka, a genjutsu expert, had taught him. Megan. Jubaku Satsu, Demon Illusion. Tree Binding Death, Kurenai called again, repeating the set of hand signs as she tried to recast the illusion, which was one of her most powerful attacks as the clone nearly reached her. Before gasping again, but this time in alarm as the same result as the first attempt happened. "It won't work," clone Naruto told Kurenai in a low tone so only she could hear. "My mother was Toka Senju, the genjutsu mistress of the Senju clan. She taught me how to instinctively break most illusions since I was a boy, and your genjutsu won't work." Clone Naruto confessed in the same quiet tone, wanting the kunoichi before him to give him a good fight by using something else that wasn't genjutsu. Since the only genjutsu he was still susceptible to were those of high rank, and even then he broke out of those relatively fast. "Damn it," Kurenai cursed, hearing the clone's words. Realizing now that she was near useless since genjutsu was her field of expertise and without it she was vulnerable in a fight, especially against a Yonin. Megan. Narukumi no Justu, Demonic Illusion. Hell Viewing Jutsu, Kurenai called out, trying a different technique as she tested the sincerity of her opponent's words, finishing a different set of hand signs as she cast the illusion. But meeting the same result as it failed to take effect. "She only knows genjutsu," clone Naruto thought in slight disappointment as he caught the alarmed look in the attractive woman's ruby eyes as she realized her illusions wouldn't work. Sighing, clone Naruto realized he wouldn't be getting a good fight from this woman as he wanted. He knew there was nothing wrong with specializing in one field, especially genjutsu, heck his mother had, but the clone was looking forward to a good fight to put on a show, but the woman had sadly disappointed him. So coming to a decision, clone Naruto decided to cast an illusion of his own that he learnt from his mother's scroll. To show the woman what a real genjutsu was so she could seek out his boss for proper training after the spar, since she seemed to possess a rare potential and passion for the area that very few had. So retrieving a kunai, clone Naruto held up a single one-handed hand sign as he molded his chakra. Whispering, "Megan. Haradatashi Doripu, Demonic Illusion." Maddening drip, before charging towards the red-eyed kunoichi who stood waiting with a kunai of her own to defend herself. Using his superior speed, clone Naruto raised his kunai-bearing hand at speeds Kurenai could barely follow before making a shallow gash across her raised arm, causing the raven head's ruby eyes to glaze over as his genjutsu immediately took effect. Inside Kurenai's mind, "Hello," Kurenai called out, looking around her as she tried to see but failed as complete darkness surrounded her. "Hello," Kurenai yelled again, not knowing how she got here as she tried moving but failing as the rest of her body below her neck refused to respond to her. "Hello, is anyone out there?" Kurenai yelled again in slight panic as she tried to catch any sound that would tell her if anyone else was out there or where she may be, but failed as she caught a faint sound in the distance instead. Drip, 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 drip. "Hello, is anyone there?" Kurenai yelled again in panic but didn't get a reply as the sound further amplified. Drip, 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 drip. "Is someone there?" Kurenai screamed again as the sound further amplified, becoming near deafening as she helplessly wondered who was there and why couldn't she move. Hello. Kurenai yelled repeatedly, near breaking down as she wondered what was going on and what was causing the unsettling sound, but got no reply as the sound continued to get louder and louder over her continuous screams. Hello. Kurenai yelled futilely one last time but got nothing except drip, 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 drip. She won't be getting up. Clone Naruto announced loud enough for the medics to hear as he gently laid Kurenai down, who had passed out from the genjutsu before dispelling, to pass on the information to Naruto, who was watching his 4 other clones fight. Stands. Asuma forgot his lit cigarette as he and several around him focused on Kurenai, who had just suddenly dropped. Ignoring the other fights, Asuma watched as Shizune with several medics came over and carried his crush away. What happened? Asuma worriedly thought as he wondered what the Yonin had done to Kurenai and why her genjutsu seemed not to work. Forgetting the other fights that were currently happening, the Sarutobi immediately left the stands and made his way towards the medical bay to check if his crush Kurenai was okay. Guy vs. Clone. I can't hold back, Guy thought in a rare moment of seriousness as he jumped back to avoid the incoming kunai that were raining down, knowing that him opening some of the Hachiman 8 gates was a high possibility considering who he was fighting, even if it was just a spar. So landing on his feet, Guy didn't bother to hold back any of his speed like he usually did with most opponents. Instead he vanished from sight, becoming a blur as he charged towards one of the incoming Yonin clones. Dynamiku Entori, dynamic entry. Guy yelled, appearing before a surprised clone and hoofing it in the face as he connected a high kick, instantly dispelling it, much to the shock of many watching who just witnessed the spandex-wearing man easily defeat the Cage Bunshin of the legendary Yonin. Fast, Naruto thought, impressed as the memories of his Cage Bunshin receiving a kick to its face returned to him. He knew that the weight seals he wore prevented his clone from reacting fast enough, but he hadn't expected a Junin to force him to release them. So forming a single hand sign, Naruto whispered, Kai, releasing the first level of his seals before forming another single Cage Bunshin and sending it towards the incoming spandex-wearing man. Wanting to see how he would deal with a clone that had more access to his full speed. Blurring forward, Guy used his full speed and strength again, spinning around as he launched a roundhouse kick towards the new incoming clone. Wanting to dispel it in one hit as he yelled, Konoha Senpu, Leaf Whirlwind. But was caught by surprise as the clone raised its arm, swiftly catching the spandex-loving shinobi's ankle before tossing him aside as clone Naruto released him with a swing of his arm. He's faster, Guy stated thoughtfully, righting himself as he gracefully landed on his feet before charging towards the waiting Yonin's clone again, that dropped into a taijutsu stance ready for him. Blurring forward, Guy his fist back and appeared before the Yonin clone, aiming a punch towards the clone's shoulder as he shifted his weight in midair, adding more strength to his blow as he waited for his fist to metal armor, but was surprised as the clone leaned left, dodging the blow before it shot out its palm, painfully striking Guy in his side, forcing the spandex-wearing man away from him. You're fast, clone Naruto stated, making his way to Guy, who threw out a 5-hit combo which Naruto promptly dodged and blocked. Thank you, Guy grunted, acknowledging the legendary man's compliment as he barely dodged the man's incoming fist before struggling to catch his follow-up one. But I'm faster, clone Naruto thought, not bothering to try retract his trapped fist as he swiftly raised his knee, burying it harshly into the spandex-loving man's gut, causing Guy's eyes to widen as an excruciating pain exploded inside of him. Before a hard follow-up punch to his chest threw him back and a final kick sent him tumbling downwards towards the arena floor. I have to use it, Guy muttered, raising himself as he got onto his hands and knees before standing up to face the clone that was approaching him. Use what? Clone Naruto thought in interest, pausing his advance as he observed Day's son, having heard the spandex-loving man's words. Before widening his eyes slightly as he watched the man's body and face turn red, his chakra becoming visible as he powered up with a technique the clone instantly recognized. Hachiman 8 gates, the clone thought in slight alarm, wondering how many gates the spandex man-wearing man could open as he watched him swiftly release the first 3. Simon Kai, Gate of Life, release. Guy yelled, releasing the third gate located on his spinal cord, having already opened the first 2 located in his brain as his veins bulged further and his power skyrocketed. Shomen Kai, Gate of Pain, release. Guy yelled, opening the 4th gate also located on his spinal cord as he further powered up, releasing the limit on his body to obtain the incredible speed and power he would no doubt need to defeat the Yonin before him. 4 gates. Naruto thought in increasing alarm as he turned from the other fights to watch the Junin before his clone further power up. He knew if the man opened a 5th gate as he suspected he would, his clone's speed would not be enough to stop him. Heck, his own might not be for that matter. So watching the spandex-wearing man power up with the Hachiman 8 gates, Naruto knew he wouldn't be able to watch all of his clones' fights like he wanted, and instead he would personally fight Guy. But first he needed to do 2 things if he was going to defeat the spandex-loving man. Firstly, he needed to drastically increase his own speed to match Guy's, which he did simply as he held up a single hand sign, muttering, "Kai," as he completely released his weight seals, knowing he couldn't hold back as he greatly reduced the strain on his body, allowing himself to move at full speeds. Secondly, he needed his clone to do something for him before it dispelled. So meeting the clone's eyes, Naruto sent it a silent message, the clone nodding as he understood before turning back to face the powering up Guy as it molded its chakra, forming a short chain of hand seals as it prepared the jutsu his boss needed before waiting for the spandex-wearing man's attack, knowing he only had 1 shot at doing what his boss needed from him. Tomen Kai. Gate of closing. Release, Guy yelled, feeling the increased strain on his body as he further powered up, releasing the 5th gate located in his abdomen before raising his head to face the clone. Vanishing at a speed a rare few could follow, Guy disappeared from sight before appearing in front of the clone, Naruto yelling, "Konoha Goriki Senpu, Leaf Strong Whirlwind." As he used a combination of great speed and strength, send a spinning back kick towards the clone, which clone Naruto failed to block, dispelling it but not before it cast the jutsu his boss needed. What the? Guy thought in alarm, his eyesight momentarily going fuzzy before it cleared up. It must be an effect of releasing 5 gates. Guy concluded, knowing that opening the gates had great risks even though he hadn't experienced this one yet. Turning his head, Guy charged towards the original Yonin as he vanished from sight with speeds only a couple few could follow before he appeared in front of the waiting Yonin. Yelling, "Omit Renge!" Front Lotus, as he launched a swift upper kick towards the Ryan no Konoha. So this is the speed of the 5th gate, Naruto thought, truly impressed as he moved back, avoiding Guy's kick even though he knew with his clone's jutsu Guy had a minute chance of truly hitting him. "Ah!" Guy yelled as he pushed himself to the limit, blitzing forward using his full speed as he threw out a 4-hit combo that the Yonin managed to dodge and move around. The 2 of them becoming a faint blur to those watching as Guy and Naruto rapidly appeared and disappeared in random areas of the arena, exchanging blows. Cage booth. He's using it, he's using Megan. Shikaku Yugami, demonic illusion, perceptual distortion. Tsunade thought worriedly as she focused on the original Naruto's fight with the spandex-wearing man. Being one of the few whose eyes could barely keep up with the blur that was her husband and Guy, as she noticed that none of the spandex-wearing man's hits came close enough to actually hitting Naruto, to the point that if he remained still most of Guy's hits would have probably missed. Which told the blonde that Guy had pushed Naruto to use one of his mother's most powerful illusions, which he never did unless he felt threatened, and that worried her. Arena. Guy vs. Naruto. How? Guy thought as he realized that something was wrong as he failed to land a punch to the Yonin's chest before missing a kick as his leg shot just wide of the Yonin's body. How have I failed to land a single blow even after opening Tomen, the gate of closing? Guy wondered again, ducking to avoid a palm strike as the Yonin went on the offensive. Before raising his leg as he barely blocked a high kick, wondering why. He suspected it may be speed, but that was unlikely as Guy had managed to match the Yonins throughout their blow exchange since opening 5 gates. So what was it? Guy wondered, jumping back as he considered taking it a step further despite the strain he felt on his aching body. Naruto slightly panted as he watched the spandex-wearing man jump back to separate himself from him. He knew with his mother's technique the man's perception of distance would be slightly affected, bring everything closer than it actually was, meaning his attacks wouldn't reach close enough, therefore missing Naruto. But the Yonin also knew from previous use of the technique that some punches and kicks could be overthrown, which meant he could still be hit if such was the case, forcing him to dodge every blow, even those that wouldn't have likely reached him, to ensure that none did. But watching the man now, Naruto had to admit he was impressed. Guy had nearly pushed him to the limit as he dodged the man's blows, even with his mother's genjutsu, and to top it off Naruto had failed to land a single hit. Even with Guy's perception of distance affected, the man had been able to block his hits, and that had beyond impressed Naruto. Though it didn't bother him since he knew the opening of the gates was straining and all he had to was wait it out. But looking at the other fights now, Naruto knew he needed to end it, and he couldn't seem weak by failing to properly defeat Guy in a stadium of spectators. So sending chakra to his limbs and muscles for the first time during his fight against Guy, Naruto pushed his body to the limit as he vanished from sight at a speed no one could follow except the cage-level spectators, who barely did before appearing in front of Guy and burying his foot into the man's sternum. Ah! Guy yelled in pain, coughing blood as the foot to his sternum threw him back, flying towards the stadium wall. Vanishing again, Naruto launched himself after Guy appeared above the man's flying form before dropping his entire weight, heel first, as he buried his foot into the Junin's chest, forming a crater as Guy's back slammed into the arena floor, defeating the man as the strain from opening the Toman gate of closing and Naruto's blow overwhelmed him. "You fought well," Naruto commented, impressed, glancing down at Day's son, who coughed out blobs of blood before falling unconscious as the Yonin thought of how he never expected a Junin to push him as far as Guy had. Stands. Such speed, Sasuke thought in awe as he failed to see anything, not even faint blurs, as he tried focusing on the spandex-wearing man and the Yonin. Tempted to active his Sharingan so he could see something at least, but resisting as he remembered his father's words to never activate it in public. This is the strength of the Dobi's grandfather, Sasuke thought as he saw the Yonin suddenly appear and stand over a defeated Guy. Before glancing away from the arena so he could look at the dead last his father had told him to befriend in the cage's booth. Maybe Tsume was right about befriending her. Sasuke thought, his single Tomo Sharingan flashing briefly as he thought about how he was going to use Toka to get her grandfather to train him. Arena. Enko vs. Clone. Doden. Doryuheiki Earth Release. Earth Wall Jutsu, Enko called out, finishing a chain of hand seals as she spat out a few blobs of mud out of her mouth, erecting a mud wall in front of her, shielding herself from the incoming kunai. "Damn it, that's jutsu is just like the snake Pedo's technique," Enko cursed, thinking about the time Orochimaru had used it in one of their spars. Before moving out from behind the earth wall as she molded her chakra, forming two quick hand signs as she prepared to face the incoming clone in front of her. "Tsunade, hidden shadow snake hands." Enko yelled out, summoning multiple poisonous snakes from her sleeve as she charged forward through the field of fallen kunai, sending the deadly reptiles towards the Yonin clone that easily dodged right, avoiding the snakes before charging forward to awaiting Enko, who now stood ready in her Hubei no Sutairu snake-style taijutsu stance with a kunai in hand. Interesting, she has the same jutsu and taijutsu style as Orochimaru. Clone Naruto thought, wondering what the relationship was between the traitor he had once called friend and the attractive woman before him. "Your jutsu and taijutsu style are very similar to my former teammate Orochimaru." "Why is that?" Clone Naruto asked, prying for information, as he dodged a kunai swipe from Enko, who lunged at him the instant he entered her range. "The pedo trained me," Enko answered between clenched teeth, her anger raising at the mention of the traitor who ruined her life as she angrily swiped her kunai several times at Yonin. "Pedo," Clone Naruto repeated in mild amusement, dodging the kunoichi's kunai swipes as he remembered one of Jiraiya's nickname for Orochimaru back when they were teens and still all friends. When Jiraiya claimed he had seen the pale male suspiciously staring at children, even though Clone Naruto knew it had been a lie. "The bastard gave me this damned hickey," Enko added lowly, thinking the clone wanted her to elaborate as she swiftly jumped up with a raised leg, aiming a high kick at the clone but failing as Clone Naruto blocked and forcefully pushed her leg away, promoting her to right herself in midair before trying to throw a hard punch as she landed, which the clone managed to dodge again, furthering her frustration as she lashed out with several kunai swipes. "Hickey," Clone Naruto thought as he frowned, looking at the woman's neck as he dodged her kunai swipes, catching sight of the three tomo that were there. "Seal," Clone Naruto whispered in recognition as his Uzumaki instincts took over, instantly catching the markings of some kind of fuinjutsu. "Yes, your former teammate gave me this," Enko clarified, her voice leaking with anger and hurt as she subconsciously covered her cursed seal, noticing the man staring, before jumping away from him as she realized her taijutsu approach wasn't working. "Orochimaru, what have you done?" Clone Naruto thought, ashamed as he wondered what his former friend did with the teachings of fuinjutsu he had given him. before breaking from his wondering thoughts as he felt the buildup of chakra in front of him. Tsunade Tajishu, many hidden shadow snake hands. Anko yelled, throwing out her sleeve as she used the advanced form of the jutsu she had previously used as a massive horde of snakes shot towards clone Naruto. Taking in the incoming snakes, clone Naruto decided to look into the matter of the seal later as he calmly formed a single-hand seal, slamming his foot onto the ground as he whispered, "Doden. Hiko Chikyu Supaiku no Jutsu, Earth Release, Flying Earth Spikes Jutsu," causing multiple earth spikes to form around him before they shot forward towards the incoming snakes and their summoner, impaling the reptiles as several of the earth spikes drove into their moving skulls, with the rest continuing towards a wide-eyed Anko. "Shit," Anko cursed in alarm as the rest of the earth spikes shoot towards her, forcing the snake mistress to send a burst of chakra towards the soles of her feet before jumping up as fast and high as she could to avoid the incoming earth spikes that would have no doubt impaled her had she not acted. "I might have to summon Kuro-chan," Anko thought, launching a downpour of Senbon towards the incoming Yonin Bunshin as she hastily landed on her feet. Watching the clone dodge her Senbon as she formed a cross sign, creating a single cage Bunshin in hopes of trying one last trick before revealing her trump card Kuro. So nodding at her clone, who knew what to do, Anko began a short sequence of hand seals, molding chakra in her lungs as she did. "Kaden. Gokaku no Jutsu, Fire Release Great Fireball Jutsu," Anko called out, breathing in deeply before shooting out a massive fireball twice the size she was towards clone Naruto, whilst her clone rapidly unleashed a volley of kunai, some with explosive tags on, behind and around the flaming orb. "Smart," clone Naruto thought, impressed by the deceptive strategy as he watched the incoming attack, seeing the ingeniousness behind it as he realized what the woman was trying to do. She was trying to force him to either dodge the fireball, which most shinobi would instinctively do, leaving him susceptible to the kunai and explosive tags, or she was trying to get him to use a weak defensive jutsu that would be enough to stop the fireball but not the following explosions from the explosive tags. "But not smart enough," clone Naruto whispered, forming a single hand sign as he molded chakra in his lungs, in a large amount of air as he prepared one of his most powerful futon, wind release jutsu that would reflect the clever attack. "Futon. Raion no Gun Jutsu, Wind Release. Lion's Roar Jutsu," Naruto thought as he let out a loud lion-like roar that shot out several sonic waves of air in front of him, destroying parts of the arena floor as the waves made their way forward towards the incoming jutsu and kunai. Was all Anko could say as her jutsu and kunai were reflected by the powerful wind jutsu. Hopelessly watching as the large flaming orb rapidly returned to her, with all her kunai and explosive tags along with large waves of air that destroyed the ground before her as they made their way towards her. Looking at her clone, Anko nodded, deciding to try make one final stand and take on the incoming attack directly, even if there was a high chance of her not surviving. Bring their hands together. Anko and her clone each made the same sequence of hand seals, as they molded every last bit of chakra they had left before yelling, "Doden. Doryuheiki no Jutsu, Earth Release, Earth Wall Jutsu," before rapidly spitting out massive blobs of mud as they formed an impressive earth wall much large and thicker than the first one Anko made, hoping to stop the incoming attack. Boom! A loud explosion sounded in the arena, turning most spectators towards it as they watched in amazement as the incoming attack collided with the massive earth wall, creating a large smoke cloud as the explosive tags ignited. Making his way forward, clone Naruto waited for the smoke to gradually clear before catching sight of the remains of the destroyed large earth wall and the unconscious form of Anko, whose clothes were singed by several burns, leaving behind a near Kunoichi who herself was relatively unharmed. Signaling to the medics, clone Naruto dispelled, sending his memories back to his creator. "Stands. HMH. Danzo hummed, impressed as his single unbandaged eye watched the power of the man's futon wind release jutsu. He knew to deflect a Kaden fire release jutsu with wind one need to be a beyond advanced futon wind release user. The only person he personally knew besides himself who could do that was Hiruzen, and that greatly worried him as he realized the man before him was showing signs of matching his rival even when he held back. "You're going to be a problem for me, Naruto Uzumaki Senju," Danzo thought thoughtfully, forming several plans as he turned to other parts of the arena where other fights were going on. Arena. Mikoto vs. Clone. Raising her katana, Mikoto remained still and watched the incoming kunai, before jumping into action as they reached her, rapidly slashing left and right, batting away the incoming weapons as she used both the slowed vision of her Sharingan and her Kenjutsu skills to defend herself. Blocking the last of the kunai, Mikoto raised her katana and charged forward towards the fastly approaching Yonin clone, sending a downward slash of her blade as it entered her range, hoping to make gash across its armor to dispel it, but swiftly being disappointed as the sound of metal hitting metal echoed between her and the clone, as her katana met a kunai that suddenly appeared in clone Naruto's raised hand. Boss was right, she is a Kenjutsu expert, clone Naruto thought in slight worry, as he gazed down at the attractive raven-haired whose well-aimed slash he had blocked. Knowing Kenjutsu had never been his thing despite his Uzumaki heritage and his father's skill in it. Drawing back her blade, Mikoto swiftly followed with 9 slashes that were all avoided as clone Naruto used his superior speed to dodge the first 7 before blocking the 8th and 9th, locking his kunai with her katana as he blocked her final attack. Ah! Mikoto groaned in effort as she tried to overpower the Kage Bunshin before her who had his kunai locked under her katana but failed as the shorter weapon remained unmoving. Pulling back as she shifted her body into a different Kenjutsu stance, Mikoto raised her katana before unleashing a frenzy of well-aimed slashes, which clone Naruto blocked, greatly relying on his superior speed as he and Mikoto danced around each other. The Uchiha and clone becoming a blur to several weaker spectators as the sound of metal clashing echoed between them as katana repeatedly met kunai. He's fast, Mikoto thought, panting as she jumped back. But he lacks the grace and skill of a Kenjutsu user, Mikoto concluded as she thought back to how her Sharingan had caught the slight awkwardness and rigidness in the clone's movements as it pried away her downpour of blows, telling her he was no Kenjutsu user. Which greatly shocked her since most Uzumaki were generally good at Kenjutsu if what Kushina told her when they were Chunin was true. Realizing she needed a way to overcome the speed difference between her and the clone, Mikoto paused her assault as rapidly racked her brain for ideas before inwardly smirking as she got one. Glancing up, Mikoto's Sharingan met violet eyes, as the Uchiha brought her fingers together in a cross-hand sign. Muttering, Kage Bunshin no Jutsu, Shadow Clone Jutsu, before several Kage Bunshin popped into existence around her. Charging forward with her clones, Mikoto yelled, Mikazuki no Mai, Dance of the Crest Moon, as she and her Kage Bunshin raised their katana, going in for the kill as they moved towards the waiting clone. Clone Naruto stood ready as he watched the Uchiha woman and her 2 clones attack from 3 different angles, one in front, one to the left and the other to the right. He knew with his weight seal's active pure speed may not be enough to get him out of this if he remained on the defensive as he had, allowing the Uchiha to attack. So with the 3 incoming opponents, clone Naruto crouched and prepared to be the one to attack instead, as he sent chakra to his legs preparing to use taijutsu to swiftly deal with the 3, but stopping in mid-step as he noticed something. Genjutsu, clone Naruto thought, immediately cursing himself as he realized he was under an illusion, wondering how he hadn't instantly noticed he was. So flaring his chakra, clone Naruto broke the illusion instantly before cursing again as he noticed instead of 3 swordswomen attacking there were in fact 4 of them with another attacking from above. Knowing with his restricted speed there was a near certain chance of him not getting out of this, if he attacked with just his taijutsu, clone Naruto calmly molded his chakra and formed a single hand seal as he called out, Futon, Daitapa, wind release, great breakthrough. Before breathing in deeply and then out as he created a gust of wind that instantly dispelled the Kage Bunshin and knocked Mikoto back, who was forced to use Kawarimi no Jutsu, body replacement jutsu, in midair after the jutsu passed to avoid an awkward landing. Damn it, Mikoto cursed from the arena woodland as she realized her genjutsu hadn't worked, having perfectly planned the attack by using her Sharingan to cast an illusion that should have hid her Kage Bunshin and allowed it to get the drop on the unsuspecting clone. Breathing deeply to calm her frustrations, Mikoto rapidly thought of a second means she could use to attempt to bridge the speed gap between her and the clone. She knew she could use her bastardized version of the lightning jutsu she had recreated from the story she had heard from Minato, who fought a Kumo shinobi with great speed that nearly matched his own. But that measure had always been a last resort she reserved for dire situations. But seeing no other option, Mikoto molded her chakra inside her body using hand signs to convert it into lightning chakra before forcing it throughout her synapses. Seeing her left hand twitch repeatedly as she got jittery, Mikoto knew the jutsu that gave her a brief speed boost was working. So charging out the woodland, Mikoto ran forward, becoming nothing but a blur to most spectators who were watching with below Junan's skill level. Before raising her katana as she reached the clone, yelling, "Raiden! Hanabira Hasu no Danmaku, lightning release, petaled lotus barrage." Before rapidly moving her arm as she swiftly sent out a total of 63 slashes. Clenching his jaw in great effort, clone Naruto rapidly moved his body as he used his full restricted speed and senses to hastily block all 63 of Mikoto's slashes, pushing him back as he pried and blocked her blows. Damn, Mikoto cursed in frustration as the last of the lightning chakra began to leave her synapses. I have to do something quick, Mikoto thought urgently, knowing her body couldn't take the strain of a second use of the jutsu as she shifted her eyes before smirking as an idea hit. Body replacement, clone Naruto thought in slight shock as the advancing Mikoto suddenly replaced herself with a log. Why would shish? Clone Naruto began wondering why the Uchiha woman suddenly used a substitution mid-attack but stopped as his eyes widened and his danger senses went haywire, picking up on something behind him. Rapidly spinning, clone Naruto reflexively threw out his left hand as he caught the edge of the rapidly descending katana from Mikoto Uchiha, who had suddenly appeared behind him, attempting a surprise attack. You substituted with the log that was behind me from your first use of Kawarimi no Jutsu, body replacement jutsu, clone Naruto stated, impressed as he held the katana firmly with his left hand. Momentarily forgetting the spar as he realized how the Uchiha woman before him had nearly got the drop on him using an E-rank academy level jutsu. Yes, Mikoto confirmed, blushing slightly as she realized how close she was to the handsome clone who was staring down at her intently with those violet eyes of his, before inwardly smirking as she noticed he still holding her katana between his fingers. What is she place? Clone Naruto thought, suddenly alarmed, seeing the glint in her red Sharingan eyes before gritting his teeth as the shock of electrical chakra hit him. Interrupting his thoughts as he felt the reason behind the glint, lightning chakra, which Mikoto had cleverly conducted through the chakra metal of her katana when she noticed the clone was still holding it. Damn it, clone Naruto cursed as he dispelled, wondering how a shinobi of his prowess had been so sloppy and allowed himself to be momentarily distracted by his thoughts of the kunoichi to not notice her channeling lightning chakra. Stands. Same old Miko-chan, Tsume thought fondly, momentarily forgetting the strife between her and her former friend as she saw the simple way Mikoto defeated the Kage Bunshin, using basics and nothing flashy, just like in the old days when they were still chibi genin, wet-nosed from the academy on the same team. Perhaps it's time I forgive you, Mikoto, Tsume whispered thoughtfully, still feeling slightly conflicted as she thought maybe it was time her and the Uchiha reconciled. Arena. Kakashi vs. Clone. Kai. Clone Naruto muttered, holding up a single left-handed seal as he sent a small burst of chakra to the storage seal above his right wrist, standing across from the silver-haired Junin who had just dodged his boss's kunai. Poof! What the? Several spectators who were focused on this area of the arena thought simultaneously in wonder as a small burst of smoke appeared around the Yonin clone's dominate hand. Before clearing to reveal a simple metallic bow staff that was gripped loosely in the Bunshin's right hand, earning several gasps from the shocked civilian spectators who had never seen the use of storage seals before. Twirling the staff around once, clone Naruto closely watched the silver-haired man across from him. He knew his boss wanted him to hold back and not go on the offensive, but this was a man he knew to be Tsukumo's son and he wanted to test him to see how his Bukijutsu skills compared with his father's. So using his staff-free hand, clone Naruto formed a short chain of seals. Whispering, Doden, Jishin no Kankaku, Earth Release, Seismic Sensory, before sending a large pulse of earth-natured chakra through the soles of his specially made ninja sandals towards the arena floor. Repeatedly doing it as he began sensing the vibrations throughout the earth of the floor around him. Concentrating, clone Naruto focused as he varied the sizes of the subsequent pulses to obtain an ideal sensing range around him. There, clone Naruto thought in triumph as he only sensed the small area around him and Kakashi, using his incomplete technique that still needed mastering. Clone Naruto knew using it was risky since it could end up overwhelming his senses if he sensed too many vibrations in too short a time. But his skill in Bojutsu was not on par with his sensei Hiruzen, and if he, a shadow clone that was dispelled with a single hit, wanted to test Tsukumo's Sharingan-bearing son's Bukijutsu skills, he needed something to increase his ability with the bow staff. He could have reduced the weight seals to increase his limited speed, but he preferred trying to use this jutsu he was determined to perfect instead. Taking his bow staff into both hands, clone Naruto shifted into the Saru no Sutairu monkey-style bojutsu stance his sensei had taught him before charging forward, loosely gripping the metal staff his sensei had long ago given him. Kaimetsu Raiko Ruihiza Sudareki, crippling primate knee strike, clone Naruto called as he charged at Kakashi with his full restricted speed becoming a blur to spectators. Before sending one end of his bow staff towards Kakashi's knee, intent on shattering the bone as he added chakra behind his blow. Boom! The sound of earth exploding echoed between clone Naruto and Kakashi as the silver-haired Junin watched wide-eyed as the blow meant for his leg struck the earth, creating a tiny crater as bits of dust and rock flew everywhere. Arg! Clone Naruto grimaced slightly as his seismic sensing nearly overwhelmed him as he felt the vibrations from his dodged bow staff hit before collecting himself and advancing again on Kakashi. Noticing the clone's slightly pained reaction and the continuous chakra pulses to the floor that he could see with his Sharingan, Kakashi filed the information away as used his dojutsu and speed to move around and block the Yonin's bow staff hits with a lone kunai. Him and clone Naruto becoming a blur as they danced around each other, rapidly shifting their weights as clone Naruto mercilessly attacked a defending Kakashi with his bow staff. Sensing Kakashi's vibrations, clone Naruto swung down his bow staff again, gripping it loosely in both hands as he shot out one end towards the Hitaki's shoulder, changing direction at the very last second as he predicted Kakashi's intended block with his seismic sensing. Ah! Kakashi gritted out as the bow staff made its way past his defenses, landing a solid hit as his shoulder exploded in unquestionable pain. I have to do it now, Kakashi decided, knowing it was time to execute his plan as he threw out 9 kunai. Jumping back away from the advancing clone, who effortlessly swung his bow staff, easily knocking aside the incoming kunai. Oko Raiko Rui Danmaku, rampant primate barrage. Clone Naruto called, twirling his bow staff as he crouched, preparing to rush the airborne Hitaki and release his 55-hit barrage, but stopping as his ears heard a very faint hissing from behind him. Explosive tag, clone Naruto thought in mild alarm as he turned to see a single sizzling tag on one of the 9 kunai that he had effortlessly knocked away, lying too far from him to catch him in its blast radius. Before widening his eyes as the tagged kunai multiplied to 15. Kunai Kage Bunshin no Jutsu, Kunai Shadow Clone Jutsu, Kakashi thought, landing on his feet as he used the jutsu he had copied with his Sharingan. Before watching as his 15 tags ignited. Boom! The tags exploded with clone Naruto just outside the blast radius, causing him to grimace in pain as his seismic senses went haywire from the vibrations caused by all 15 of the exploded tags. Arg! Clone Naruto groaned as he tightened his grip on his bow staff, his senses discombobulating as the overload of his seismic sensing jutsu overwhelmed him, causing the disoriented Kage Bunshin to dispel as the overload became too much. With Naruto, too, Naruto thought to himself as he jumped out of the crater in which the defeated guy lay in. That was the number of opponents he counted that he had left to deal with as he went through the last of his clone's incoming memories. Sighing as he made his way away from the crater, Naruto debated with himself, wondering if he should hold back just as his clones had her go all out. Yes, there were moments when his clones had not held back, like when his one clone used his S-ranked Futon Jutsu to deflect the fireball, or when the other used his mother's S-ranked Genjutsu on the ruby-eyed Kunoichi, but that was just the tip of his abilities. They had all held back something to make the spar look somewhat even, just as Hiruzen had wanted. But looking back at his clones' memories, Naruto was not satisfied with what they had exhibited before the people of Konoha. So, coming to a decision as he faced the 2 incoming shinobi, Naruto decided to not go completely all out but to not hold back either, and to show Konoha why he was the Raion no Konoha. So, molding chakra in his lungs, Naruto began a long chain of seals, refusing to be on the defensive any longer like most of his clones had done, as he prepared an elemental jutsu he knew in his weakest nature transformation out of the 4 he had mastered. Kaden. Karyu Enden, Fire Release. Flame Dragon Bullet, Naruto mentally called out, performing his strongest Kaden jutsu as he deeply breathed in, filling his lungs with air before spewing out a massive torrent of flames that shaped into an intimidating flaming dragon before shooting forwards towards the 2 incoming Junin. Wow! The bulk of the odd spectators thought as all the stadium watched the large flaming dragon fly towards Mikoto and Kakashi. Shit! Kakashi and Mikoto simultaneously cursed inwardly as they saw the large incoming fire dragon. The two cursing not because of the impressive jutsu but because they knew the Yanin was no longer holding back. Having heard stories about Naruto's abilities before his death, both Sharingan users knew that the clones they had fought were definitely not going all out. But by the looks of the incoming jutsu they knew things had changed. So nodding to each other, both Junin knew they were thinking the same thing, so turning back to the incoming flaming dragon, Kakashi and Mikoto both separated, jumping apart as they avoided the incoming Kaden attack before beginning the same sequence of hand seals as they both landed, with Mikoto using only her left katana free hand. Kaden. Gokaku no Jutsu, Fire Release Great Fireball Jutsu. The two Sharingan users simultaneously called out as they molded a large amount of chakra in their lungs, breathing in deeply before spewing out two massive flaming orbs that weren't as impressive as Naruto's dragon but were just as intimidating as they poured in extra chakra into the jutsu to drastically increase the fireball's sizes, making them 4 times the height they were. Naruto hummed thoughtfully as he debated his options in dealing with the incoming fire orbs. He could either use his pure speed to dodge them since his weight seals had remained removed, or he could use his S-rank futon jutsu on a larger scale than he had previously done, but he had already used the jutsu and wanted to do something different. So deciding to go with a defensive jutsu from one of his 2 primary affinities, Naruto held up a single hand sign, molding his chakra as he rapidly gathered moisture from the air. Sweden. Sujinheki, Water Release. Water Formation Wall, Naruto whispered as a large amount of water gathered around him, forming an impressive water wall. Stands. No water source. Several shinobi who were Sweden water release users or who had studied it thought in awe as they watched the Yanin form a massive water wall with no water source and with only a single hand sign before the 2 incoming massive flaming orbs hit the impressive water wall, canceling out as a large steam cloud formed over the arena, obscuring the spectators' view. Arena. Damn. Mikoto thought as the steam cleared to reveal a completely unharmed Naruto who stared at them intently in his Senju armor as his red mane blew with the wind behind him. She knew in that moment that she and Kakashi were in over their heads, but that didn't mean she would go down without a fight. So raising her katana, Mikoto charged forward. Ah! Mikoto cried out in pain as the Yanin she was charging to vanished from sight and blitzed towards her at speeds her Sharingan couldn't keep up with before appearing in front of her and harshly kicking her in the side as he connected with her ribs. Crack! Naruto heard faintly breaking the Uchiha's ribs as she flew back, her katana leaving her hand as Naruto charged towards her again. Body replacement. Naruto cursed as his fist buried itself into a log, shattering it as he tried to land his finishing blow on the Uchiha, but only meeting wood as the Raven Head used Kawarimi no Jutsu, Body Replacement Jutsu. HMH. Naruto hummed impressed as he stared down at the log remains, thinking of his clone's memories and how the Kunoichi had effectively used the E-rank jutsu 3 times today, nearly getting the drop on him on her second use, which no shinobi had ever done using an academy-level jutsu. Chidori. Naruto heard someone call out from behind him as 2 hands rose from the ground under him, firmly grasping his ankles and holding him in place as the sound of chirping birds surrounded him. Tsukumo's boy, Naruto thought to himself, glancing over his armored shoulder as he caught sight of the silver-haired man fastly approaching with a lightning-covered hand. Wondering how he should deal with the predicament he was in before smirking as an idea that would let him use one of his favorite arts hit him. Uzumaki Shirusutairu. Kongo Fusa Uzumaki Sealing Style, Adamantine Sealing Chains. Naruto called out, holding up a single hand sign as gold chakra chains shot out from around him, 2 going shooting out toward the wrists of the hands holding him in place and the rest flying towards the incoming Chidori bearing Kakashi. Damn it! Kakashi inwardly cursed as golden chakra chains firmly wrapped around him, restraining him as his Chidori encased hand forcefully stopped inches away from black Senju armor, causing the Hitaki to release his lightning jutsu as he looked at his cage bunshin that was about to be flung out the ground by chakra chains. There, Naruto thought as his feet were freed by his chakra chains as they yanked out the restrained Junin behind him's cage bunshin before tossing it back forcefully, causing the clone to disperse. Poof! Naruto heard a small smoke cloud surrounding him from behind as the original Kakashi substituted at the last possible instant with his tossed clone the very millisecond before it dispersed, freeing himself as he trading places with the airborne bunshin, that instead dispersed in the Junin's former trapped position behind Naruto. Osushi, Usagi, Suru. Kakashi quickly formed as he went through the three-hand seals ox, rabbit and monkey before clutching his right forearm as a more focused encasing of blue electrical chakra covered his right hand. Rakiri. Kakashi called out, landing on his feet before he charged forward towards the vanishing smoke cloud around the Yonin. Rakiri, Naruto repeated to himself as he watched Kakashi charge towards him with the impressive lightning jutsu, thinking how just like Day's son the silver-haired man had truly impressed him. But now it was time to end this spar and defeat both the Hatake and wounded Uchiha. Charging forward, Naruto held out his right palm, using the highest form of chakra-shaped transformation as a blue swirling orb of chakra started forming in his hand. Before pouring more chakra into it, nearly doubling its size as he decided to use the more powered-up version of his original jutsu. Odama Rasengan, Naruto called out, thrusting his palm forward as his Rasengan met Kakashi's Rakiri. Stands. Rasengan, the odd spectators thought in amazement as they watched the Yonin's original jutsu clash with Kakashi's Rakiri. The two jutsu becoming near blinding as they battled for dominance. Ah! The spectators heard as Kakashi's screams filled the arena. The gray man's jutsu overpowered as the spectators watched Naruto's Rasengan painfully grind into the Junin as he took the full force of the deadly spiraling sphere. Arena. You fought well, Hatake-san, Naruto complimented just as he had done with the spandex-wearing man. Standing over the gray-haired Junin whose flak jacket had a massive hole through, exposing his now injured torso. Arg! Kakashi groaned as he passed out from the painful jutsu, having missed what the Yonin had said. Kaden. Hosenka no Jutsu, Fire Release. Phoenix Sage Fire Jutsu, Mikoto feebly called out as she blew out a volley of small fireballs towards Naruto's turned back, concealing several lightning-infused kunai within the flames as she tried to catch the Yonin off guard but failed to as a stone wall rose from behind the turned Yonin, blocking her attack. Doden. Ishigaki no Jutsu, Earth Release. Stone Wall Jutsu, Naruto whispered as he held up a single-hand seal, naming the defensive jutsu he had used to shield himself from the incoming attack he had sensed from behind him. Arg! Mikoto grimaced between clenched teeth, clutching her broken ribs as she retrieved a single kunai. Ready to make a final stand against the Yonin before her and prove herself to the Hokage and Fugaku, whom she knew was watching, but mostly to herself that she was still strong and not weak. She's finished, Naruto thought as he watched the Uchiha across from. He could see there was no way she could fight if the way she was clutching her ribs was anything to go by. He also knew a shinobi of her rank should know when they are beat and retreat, or in this case give up, but he could tell from the defiant look in her eyes that the Uchiha before him wasn't going to do that. Frowning, Naruto wondered why that was the case, wondering if it perhaps was the arrogance most Uchiha were known for, the refusal to lose to a senju, that made her hopelessly continue. But glancing at her face, Naruto immediately wiped his frown away. Seeing no arrogance but rather just determination to prove a point. What the point was or who it was to Naruto didn't know. But sighing to himself, the Yonin decided to pity her. So needing chakra in his stomach, Naruto shot out a simple water bullet which the Uchiha dodged, giving him a chance to blitz behind her and send a swift chop to her neck, knocking her out as he caught her. Ending the spar as Inoichi announced his win, earning cheers from the spectators as Naruto lowered Mikoto to the ground. Listen, Gaki, we just want your money and we will leave you and your mother alone, a man with a kunai said as he tried prying off the kid who had jumped onto his back. No, just leave us alone, the boy yelled before crying out in pain as the man forcefully grabbed him and yanked off his back, throwing him onto the ground. Inari, a woman yelled out in worry as she ran over to check on her son. Look, lady, the man with kunai said. Ono-chan, and I don't want any trouble. The man continued, pausing as he gestured at his bandit wife who tried looking intimidating as she stood there narrowed-eyed with a kunai of her own. We just want your money. Here, the woman said, crying openly as she pulled out all the ryo she had and gestured for the bandits to take it and leave. Since she knew just how bad these people could be and didn't want her son to die or worse over some money. I told you it would work, Yoshi-kun, the bandit woman Ono said triumphantly as she stepped forward to take the money but didn't get a chance to as a lone shuriken flew through the air and buried itself in her outstretched hand. Ah! The woman cried out in agony as she clutched her now bleeding hand. I wouldn't take that if I was you, a cold voice said warningly over the woman's screams, causing everyone to fall dead silent as a chilling atmosphere filled the area. turning everyone's attention in the direction of the voice. Ryan no Konoha. The bandit man Yoshi whispered, terrified as he saw the S-class nin who had entered every single bingo book in the last 3 months. Standing intimidatingly in front of a raven-haired woman who glared at them with red eyes, a katana in her hand. "Take your partner and leave," the intimidating man said to the male bandit whom he saw recognized him as he gestured to the injured lady whose hand he had buried a shuriken in. "Come on, Ono," a terrified Yoshi hastily said as he stepped forward to grab his wife. But didn't get the chance to as the Ryan no Konoha appeared in front of him and grabbed him forcefully by the throat. "And if you ever try robbing anyone again," the redhead man added warningly before flaring his killing intent to show the bandit what would happen if he tried stealing from someone again. Won't," Yoshi chalked out as he struggled to breath from both the killing intent and the hand around his throat. "Good," the frightening man said before tossing the bandit aside, who hastily left with his wife. "You know they will probably try robbing someone again in a couple of months, right, Naruto-sama?" The woman behind the Yonin asked as she sheathed her katana. "I know, Mikoto," Naruto replied, glancing at the woman who had been assigned to be his partner. Flashback. 1 month after Naruto's spar. "Naruto-kun, ready for your first mission, I see," Hiruzen jokingly said, smiling at the man who entered his office, knowing very well this actually wasn't his first mission but his first since returning. "Hi sensei," Naruto said, smiling back at the third Hokage, whom he had agreed with several days before that it was best for him to go on several high-class missions outside the village to rebuild his fearsome reputation and get the knowledge of his return out there. "Good, I have a S-class mission for you," Hiruzen said, gesturing at a small mission scroll that lay on his desk, knowing his student would accept nothing less. "But first there is something I want to discuss with you," Hiruzen added, stopping Naruto before he could reach out for the scroll. "Anbu, leave us," Hiruzen commanded, telling the hidden Anbu to leave them, which they promptly did before the old man activated his office silencing seal. "Naruto, do you remember what I told you about the Uchiha several weeks ago?" Naruto nodded to show his sensei that he did, recalling the information the old man had given him about the massacre and the truth behind it, causing him to slightly frown as he thought of how he disapproved of his sensei actions in dealing with the attempted coup by killing the innocent along with the guilty. But choosing not to go into it since now was not the time to voice that. What was done, and arguing with his sensei now would change nothing. "One of the 3 survivors, Mikoto Uchiha, the one you fought in the spar last month, approached me and asked to rejoin the shinobi forces. In fact, her wanting to rejoin was the reason behind her odd request to spar with you in the council meeting," Hiruzen explained, earning a nod from Naruto, who remembered the woman who had impressed him during their spar by using an E-rank jutsu dangerously against his clone. "Hi, I remember her, sensei, but what does she have to do with me or my mission?" Naruto questioned, although he suspected where his sensei was going with this. "I want you to take her as your partner on missions and watch over her, Naruto," Hiruzen answered, earning a frown from the redhead man who had suspected exactly that. "You want to pair her with me so I can spy on her?" "Yes and no, Naruto," Hiruzen clarified. "Mikoto is a capable kunoichi, Naruto-kun. Her powerful kenjutsu and radiant lightning release abilities make her an ideal candidate to pair with you," Hiruzen added, knowing that his student would agree that having someone who was strong in the areas he was weakest as a partner would serve best for him. "And me spying on her?" "Not spying, Naruto. I want you to keep an eye on her during missions and ensure she's no threat to the village," Hiruzen instructed, earning a nod from Naruto, who knew his sensei would have to be an idiot if he completely turned a blind eye and took no precautions with the Uchiha after what they had attempted to do. "Fine, sensei, I'll do it," Naruto agreed, earning a look of gratitude from Hiruzen, who handed the man his mission scroll. Flashback end. "Are you okay?" Mikoto asked, breaking Naruto from his thoughts as the Uchiha approached the woman and child who were nearly robbed. "Yes, I'm fine, thank you," the woman said as Mikoto bent down to help up the boy who was next to her, but the Uchiha just got a huff and a glare instead as her offered hand was ignored. "I'm sorry," the woman said as she sighed, seeing her son's rude display. "He has been like that since Kaiza passed," the woman continued, glancing at the man who had saved them before blushing as she got a proper look at his handsome features. "Kaiza?" Mikoto asked, turning the woman's attention back to her. "Yes, he was my husband and Inari's father figure," the woman explained, her expression becoming instantly crestfallen. "I'm sorry, I shouldn't have asked," Mikoto apologized as she saw how her probing affected the woman. It's fine, the woman said, waving off Mikoto's apology before realizing she hadn't introduced herself or her son. I'm Tsunami, by the way, and that is my son Inari. The woman Tsunami introduced, gesturing at her son, who now stood leaning against a tree some distance away from the adults. I'm Mikoto Uchiha, and this is my partner Naruto Uzumaki Senju. Mikoto introduced, gesturing at the Yanin. Partner Cu2ar, Tsunami began curiously, shifting her eyes between the two partners who made a great couple. No, Mikoto instantly interrupted, blushing as she saw where the woman was heading. Naruto-sama is my teammate. Mikoto clarified, not daring to face the man and letting him see her blush. Oh, Tsunami said awkwardly, realizing the wrong conclusion she had just drawn. Anyways, thank you both, Naruto-san, Mikoto-san, for saving me and Inari-chan. Tsunami earnestly thanked, earning nods from the Yanin and blushing Uchiha. Tsunami-san, if I may ask, Naruto spoke up, turning the woman's attention to the handsome man. What are you and your son Inari doing out here all alone? Naruto questioned, wondering why a civilian woman and child would do a near reckless thing and move alone in these parts of Hino Kuni that were very dangerous and well known for bandit attacks. We were on our way to Konoha, Naruto-san, Tsunami simply replied, not realizing the man was heading in the same direction. Line break. Konoha Hospital. Very good, Shizune, Tsunade approved as she watched her apprentice of 3 months effortlessly repeat what she had just shown her as they sat in the blonde's large hospital office. Thank you, Tsunade-sama, Shizune said, smiling, feeling an overwhelming sense of pride from hearing the legendary medic's approval. Still thinking about the big news? Shizune asked, smiling, gesturing at the blonde woman's stomach after seeing her drift away. Yes, Tsunade admitted, smiling to her apprentice as she placed her hand on her stomach, partially telling the truth. As her mind also drifted to the conversation she had 3 months ago with Hiruzen. Flashback. 1 month after Naruto's spar. Toka. Tsunade yelled angrily as she stared in the mirror, looking at her once blonde hair that was now red, having obviously been dyed the previous night whilst she slept. Yes, Bachan, Toka answered innocently, entering the room with a slight grin, causing Tsunade to gain an angry tick mark at being called granny by the guilty girl who had the nerve to act innocent. What have I told you about your pranks, Toka? Tsunade asked, folding her arms in front of her chest as she glared down at the guilty girl. I just wanted your hair to be like mine and Ojiazan's, I'm sorry. Toka apologized, her eyes watering as her bottom lip trembled. It's fine, Toka-chan, Tsunade said, sighing, her anger diminishing as saw the girl was near tears. I will let you off this time, but just don't do it again. Thanks, Bachan, Toka yelled happily, her mood doing a 180 as she ran out the room, giggling, thinking of how her ingenuous faked act just got her out of trouble. Toka, Tsunade yelled angrily, again realizing Toka had played her with fake tears and soppy explanations. Just like Kushina-chan, Tsunade muttered fondly, remembering how just like Toka her daughter had also used fake tears more than once to get out of trouble. Now how am I going to get this out before Naruto-kun comes back? Tsunade wondered, looking at her now red hair as she thought of how she was going to get the dye out before her husband returned from his 3-day mission. Having agreed that it was fine if he took high-ranking ones just as long as they kept him away for only a couple of days at a time. Tsunade. Tsunade heard a familiar voice call out from the front door as someone knocked on it, causing her to curse as she considered a henge but deciding against it since the owner of the voice would likely see past it. Sensei. Tsunade greeted warmly, opening the door to welcome in the Hokage. I see Toka-chan is back to her old ways, Hiruzen stated in an amused voice, looking at his student's red hair but not daring to laugh as he saw the warning glare the blow redhead sent him. Is there somewhere we can talk in private, Tsunade? Hiruzen asked, shifting into his Hokage mode. Yes, this way, Tsunade answered, hearing the seriousness in the old man's voice before leading him into one of the rooms that served as an office. Tsunade-chan, you know, over the years after becoming your sensei I have grown to see you, Jiraiya, Naruto and even Orochimaru as my own children. Hiruzen began as he sat down in one of the chairs, his voice turning remorseful as he thought of his pale student who had lost his way, wondering how he as his sensei and father figure had failed him. Hi sensei, and you are like a father to us. Tsunade replied earnestly, knowing the old man had always been the only father an orphan Jiraiya knew, and also he had become a second father to both her and Naruto after they lost their parents. Thank you, Tsunade-chan, Hiruzen replied warmly, smiling sadly at his female student whom he knew he had come here to burden. Tsunade-chan, what do you know about the Clan Restoration Act? The Hokage asked, getting down to business, causing Tsunade to instantly become hostile as she realized why her sensei had come here and where this conversation was leading. Sensei, I won't let you put him under the act, Tsunade snarled angrily, not believing the nerve of this man who she had called a second father moments before, only for him to go on and actually suggest such a thing. And I'm not going to, Hiruzen said earnestly, placing a hand on Tsunade's shoulder to calm her. You are like my daughter Tsunade, and I would never forcefully do that to you or Naruto as your sensei or as the man you both consider to be like a father. Hiruzen added, calming the woman. But as your Hokage I must ask you to consider it. Hiruzen continued, causing Tsunade to become hostile again. The act is a vile excuse for perverts to build harems. Hokage-sama and Naruto-kun is not one of them. I won't let you put him under it or even consider it. Tsunade angrily stated, hating the perverted act that her granduncle had come up with and the fact that the old man before her actually wanted her to consider it. Tsunade-chan, the Hokage began calmly, having expected this reaction from her. Do you know that the two founding clans of Konoha have dwindled down to 6 members? Tsunade. 6, that is the combined number of the surviving and loyal members of the Senju and Uchiha clans. The 2 clans that founded and were the backbone of Konoha's strength. So put Fugaku, or better yet his son, under the act. Hiruzen. Tsunade yelled angrily. Just don't put my husband Naruto-kun under it. I can't. Tsunade, not after what the Uchiha did, Hiruzen explained, knowing his 3 loyal students all knew the truth behind the massacre. The Uchiha have never truly been a trustworthy clan, even during the days of Konoha's founding. Hiruzen continued, hating that he had to spit down on the names of good, loyal Uchiha like Kagami and Itachi, but knowing it was true they had never truly been a trustworthy clan. And if I do take action to drastically increase their numbers, what would the new Uchiha clan do if they one day learnt about the truth behind the massacre? Hiruzen questioned, voicing one of his fears that held him back from approaching the remaining Uchiha with this. I would rather help the Senju grow than help the Uchiha who may one day turn against Konoha. But why Naruto? Why the CRA? With Toka the AC, Tsunade began arguing, wanting to tell the old man that with Toka the act wasn't necessary, but stopping as she remembered the girl's questions concerning a certain Hyuga heiress in her class. Because of his Uzumaki and Senju genes. Tsunade-chan, Hiruzen stated, knowing that starting a clan with that combination of genes would surely make fearsome members. Adding that to his loyalty and strength, Naruto-kun is the perfect man to place under the CRA. And we both know that Toka-chan may never have children of her own. Hiruzen stated, referring exactly to what Tsunade was thinking about. Seeing his student was still conflicted, Hiruzen inwardly sighed as he decided to go for the jugular, bracing himself for how the woman would react. Tsunade-chan, do you know why Konoha has never trained any one of their 3 Jinchuriki? Hiruzen asked, referring to how Konoha was the only village that never tried to control the Biju they possessed. Because we were strong enough to not have to. Kumo, Suna, Kiri and Iwa all needed to, but we didn't have to. Not until we lost the strength of our 2 most powerful clans, not until now. You bastard, Tsunade whispered, staring at her sensei wide-eyed. You want me to give my husband a harem of women, or you will train my granddaughter to control the Kyuubi? Tsunade added, reading between the lines of what Hiruzen was implying. No, Tsunade. Toka is like a grandchild to me and I would never do such a thing to her. But as Hokage I have to consider the circumstances and the reports I get from Jiraiya. Kumo and Iwa are rumored to have 2 fully trained Jinchurikis each. And if Konoha goes to war with either village that we are not allied with, now or in the future, training Toka or whomever as the Jinchuriki of the Kyuubi will have to be an option considered by the current Hokage of the time due to Konoha's weakened state. Hiruzen stated, pausing as he let the statement sink into Tsunade's mind, knowing she would catch on to the fact that any future Jinchuriki Konoha had would likely be Naruto and her's descendant. Due to the Kyuubi being known to only being able to be held by an Uzumaki, and the only future Uzumaki in Konoha would likely be their descendants. I'm asking you to consider helping me take this measure to restore Konoha's strength, so no Hokage will have to consider what I just told you about the Kyuubi. By letting the husband I just regained build a harem of women. Tsunade tearfully asked, her anger diminishing as she considered her sensei's words and what she had to do to ensure Toka or any of hers and Naruto's descendants didn't have to endure the gruesome training of a Jinchuriki. No, Tsunade. I won't ask you to consider him taking a horde of wives like the act states. I'm just asking you to consider he take one more. Hiruzen reasoned, hating that he had placed this burden on his student but knowing he had to if he wanted to restore the Senju. Since it was near impossible for one woman to bear all the children needed to restore a clan. But it's still sharing him, Tsunade stated, laughing dryly at her sensei's poor attempt of making her feel better about sharing Naruto. I know, Hiruzen stated, smiling sadly at his student that he could see was truly hurt by what he had said. I won't tell Naruto-kun anything or place him under the act until you decide, Tsunade-chan. If you don't want to share him you won't have to, but all I ask is that you consider it. Hiruzen stated, earning an appreciative look from Tsunade, who could see the man meant it. He would not place her husband under the act unless she allowed him to. Thank you, sensei, I will try consider it. I'm truly sorry, Tsunade-chan, I wish I didn't have to ask this of you. The Hokage apologized before promptly leaving. Flashback end. Tsunade-sama. Tsunade heard someone call out, breaking her out her thoughts. Yes, Shizune, Tsunade said, looking at the woman who was apparently the niece of a man her and Naruto had met once or twice before. Are you okay? Shizune asked worriedly. I've been calling you for the last 5 minutes. I'm fine, Shizune. Tsunade waved off before dismissing the woman from her office, ending their lesson for today. Sighing as the door shut behind her apprentice, Tsunade sat back as she considered what her sensei had said, like she had repeatedly done for the last 3 months. Could I share Naruto-kun? Tsunade wondered, still failing to accept the idea, having tried to humor and accept it repeatedly but failing each time. She knew for the good of her clan, her village and most importantly her descendants, the CRA was something she had to accept, but she couldn't. She couldn't agree to share her husband, and even if she did, would Naruto? Tsunade doubted he would. He loved her too much for that, and she knew it. Just like how she would never take another man, he would never take another woman. Sighing as she looked at the time, Tsunade decided to push this internal debate aside for a later time, just like she had repeatedly done over the last months. Getting up as she smiled, the blonde thought of how her husband was returning today and how he would likely react to the good news, but first she had to pick up Toka from the academy. Line break. Hi no Kuni. So this Gato, your father plans to gather the villagers and stand against him? Naruto questioned, hating the man whom Tsunade had just described to him and Mikoto. Having met many greedy men like him who preyed on the weak and took what wasn't theirs, not caring who got hurt or in Kaisa's case died. Yes, that's why he sent Inari-chan and me to Konoha. So that we could seek asylum there and be safe until Gato was dealt with. Tsunade explained, remembering her father Tsunade's plan after Kaisa died. Flashback. Are you sure about this, Otusan? Tsunade questioned, having listened to her father's plan of making a stand against Gato. Yes, Tsunade-chan, I am. I can't let Kaisa's death be for nothing. Tsuna replied, his voice dropping low as he mentioned the man his daughter had cared for. And Inari-chan and I, why do we have to leave you here to deal with Gato alone, Otusan W? No, Tsuna immediately said, waving off his daughter's argument. I promised Kaisa I would keep the two of you safe if anything ever happened to him, and that's what I'm going to do. Oto, you're my daughter, Tsunade. I can't risk you or Inari getting hurt. Tsuna said, knowing if he was going to rally the villagers behind him, his daughter and grandson would likely be in danger, which was something he couldn't risk. You promise you will write to me and tell me everything that happens? Tsunade questioned, accepting her father's plan as she realized he was right. Standing against Gato could risk Inari, and that was something she couldn't do. Yes, I promise, Tsuna said, smiling at Tsunade, seeing that she had agreed with his plan. Okay, let me go tell Inari-chan, Tsunade said, sighing as she wondered how the boy would react to this. He had already lost the man he, though a father, now he had to leave his home too. Flashback end. Naruto frowned as he contemplated Tsunade and the waves situation, having listened to the woman's story and her father's plan. He knew he could send a few Kage Bunshin and have the situation swiftly dealt with, letting the woman immediately return home to a freed Nami no Kuni by the time she returned. But he also knew from what she had said to Tsuna, her father wanted to rally the people and stand against Gato themselves. Which in his opinion would be better than him dealing with it. Since if they succeeded in removing Gato by themselves, they would become stronger people, teaching them how to fight for themselves when someone like him wasn't there to save the day. So for now he would help Tsunade get to Konoha, and if she told him her father failed or asked for his help, he would step in and do something. Tsunami-san, you said you and Inari-san were heading to Konoha, Naruto stated, shocking Mikoto, who realized that the man planned to do nothing about Gato. Mikoto and I are also going there and we would be happy to escort you. Naruto offered, causing the woman to hesitate as she feared being a further burden to these two shinobi who had saved. I do. Tsunami began, wanting to politely decline but was quickly waved off by Naruto, who caught on to the woman's reasons for being so hesitant. It won't be of an inconvenience to us, Tsunami-san, like I said, we are already going there. Naruto reassured, smiling slightly at the woman to affirm his reassurance, causing her to slightly blush as she looked at his handsome smiling face, contemplating his words. If it isn't an inconvenience, then Inari-chan and I would be very grateful if you escorted us, Tsunami replied, looking at the man and woman who had been so generous to them. Naruto-sama, Mikoto called out as she pulled the Yanin away from the woman and child. We have to help them. The Uchiha protested, even though she knew it wasn't her place since he outranked her despite the friendlier terms they were on since becoming a team. They need to have a chance to first try help themselves, Mikoto. Bu. Mikoto, I know you have good intentions and think that saving them now is the best option, but trust me, it's not. Naruto said before sighing as he told Mikoto of a mission him and his team went on, where they encountered a town that was very similar to the Wave Country. Flashback. Tsuchi no Kuni, Earth Country. Outskirts of Akitsu Town. On the outskirts of Akitsu Town stood 5 cloaked figures. The 4 younger ones were closely listening as the 5th older one spoke to them. Now remember what I said, I want the 4 of you to keep your heads down, especially you, Jiraiya-kun. The older one, Hiruzen, instructed, looking at his 4 students before lingering on the white-haired one who had a flair for attracting attention. Hi sensei. 3 of the 4 younger ones, Orochimaru, Naruto and Tsunade, replied as Jiraiya opened his mouth to protest but failed to, as an elbow to the gut courtesy of Tsunade stopped him. Hi sensei. Jiraiya begrudgingly agreed, after he recovered from Tsunade's blow. Before grumbling lowly about violent teammates and his sensei picking on him instead of the creepy Orochi-tem. Naruto-kun, I want you to keep Jiraiya-kun in line, Hiruzen ordered as he gazed at the redhead Junin, who he knew Jiraiya would listen to. Hi sensei. Naruto complied, earning a betrayed look from his best friend who thought the redhead would at least try defend him. Good, Hiruzen said, nodding at Naruto before looking at all 4 as he wondered if bringing them with him to Tsuchi no Kuni was a good idea. Since they were only 13 after all, even if 3 were Junin and the other a Chunin. Sensei, what are we doing here? Tsunade asked, wanting to know what they were doing here since their sensei was very vague about their mission, which he rarely ever was. I'm here to meet a very important contact, Hiruzen informed seriously, knowing the person he had to meet had very crucial information about the Tsuchikage. You, however, are here to enjoy the Iwa Mochi, Hiruzen informed jokingly, laughing as he saw the annoyed look on Tsunade's face, who knew exactly what that was. Iwa Mochi? Jiraiya questioned. A rice cake that's served in these regions, Orochimaru explained in annoyed voice, knowing about the crispy textured rice cake that was a regional specialty in Tsuchi no Kuni. Wondering if their sensei had actually brought them all this way just for that. Sensei, you can't be serious, Tsunade gritted out, feeling just as equally annoyed as Orochimaru. Yes, actually the Iwa Mochi was part of the reason I brought you here, Hiruzen answered. But the other is to teach you stealth and how to infiltrate areas that Konoha might not be on the friendliest of terms with. Areas that might not be so welcoming to you, Hiruzen added in serious voice, causing his students to nod grimly as they now understood their sensei's insistence on not drawing attention to themselves, since they knew of the very rocky relationship between Iwa and Konoha right now. And what would probably happen if they encountered Iwa Nin. Seeing his students understood the directness of the situation, Hiruzen gestured for them to follow as he made his way from the outskirts of Akitsu town to its heart. What's wrong with them? Jiraiya asked Naruto loudly as he looked at the citizens of the town, who all had a grim and crestfallen air around them. None of them smiling, even the children. Shish, Tsunade quietly shushed Jiraiya as she noticed people staring when they heard his loud question. Here we are, Hiruzen said as the 5 of them stopped by a roadside inn. This is where you will be staying. You? Naruto questioned, noticing his sensei only said you instead of we. Yes, you. I will be gone for tonight and I need the 4 of you to stay here and remain unnoticed. Nodding to their sensei words, Naruto along with the other 3 followed Hiruzen into the inn. Welcome, I'm Misaka and this is Otoki, how may we help you? A very beautiful lady with delicate features said in an angelic voice, smiling warmly at the five. Earning a blush from Hiruzen and Jiraiya, who were mesmerized by the woman's beauty and her equally good-looking counterpart, who they suspected was her sister due to their unquestionable resemblance. I'm Fumio and this is my niece Tsunade and my nephews Naruto, Jiraiya and Orochimaru. Hiruzen introduced using the name and story he had told his students to use. Since his actual name, Hiruzen, might draw attention if someone were to recognize it. And I would like a room for the next couple of nights, please. Hiruzen added, earning a blush from Naruto, who noticed his sensei said room not rooms, and a growl from Tsunade, who noticed the redhead's blush. A room, Otoki said in surprise. Yes, I don't want us to sleep separately for safety reasons, of course. No, it's not that, Otoki said, waving off the man's explanation, having already met families that shared rooms despite their, even though she suspected these five weren't really a family. We just don't get many people who want to stay here in Akitsu town or this inn. Not sin. We will have a room prepared for you, Misaka interrupted, glaring at her sister, who nearly drove away the first guests they had in a long time by opening her big mouth. Thank you, Hiruzen said, handing a generous amount of ryo to Misaka as he frowned, wondering what Otoki wanted to say and if it had anything to do with the grim attitude of the town folk. Line break. That evening, Naruto, Orochimaru, Tsunade and Jiraiya sat at a table in the inn dining area as they ate the iwa mochi the two sisters had prepared. They had to admit the stuff was pretty damn good, just as their sensei, who had already left, said. You four aren't really his niece or nephews, are you? Misaka asked, stated as she came over to stand by the table the 14 sat, causing them to stiffen as Orochimaru went for his kunai pouch, meeting Naruto's eyes as he silently asked if they should act. But stopping as he saw the violet-eyed boy slightly shake his head, telling him not yet. Ah, you are shinobi, Otoki stated, also coming over, having noticed the pale teen's movement. Relax, we won't tell anyone, Misaka promised sincerely, causing the four to relax slightly as they listened to the woman's angelic voice. Beside, there isn't anyone to tell because of them, Misaka muttered lowly, her venom-laced voice catching the four shinobi off guard as they wondered who this them was. What happened here? Orochimaru asked curiously, wondering what had happened to cause this town's attitude to turn so gloomy. The saw, Otoki began speaking but stopped as her sister sent her a warning look. Nothing happened, Misaka said evenly, glaring at Otoki. They could help us, nay. Otoki tried reasoning but stopped as Misaka stormed over to her. Nothing happened, Misaka repeated more forcefully, shooting Otoki a warning look. They are shinobi, nay-san, they could help us, Otoki reasoned. Wake up, Otoki, they can't help us, no one can. Misaka shot back, ignoring the looks she got from the teens who wondered what the sisters were talking about. That's what you said about the others and I listened to you, but not anymore, Otoki said defiantly, turning from her sister who had stopped her from asking the few shinobi who had passed through for help. Shut up, Otoki, Misaka said harshly, forcefully turning Otoki back to her. It was your big mouth that went screaming for help that day and got half this town killed. Do you want that to happen again? Misaka added in an equally harsh voice before instantly regretting it as she saw the pained look on Otoki's face, who still felt terrible about what her actions that day had resulted in. I'm sorry, Otoki-chan, that was uncalled for, Misaka apologized remorsefully, feeling terrible for losing her temper and saying such a horrid thing to her sister as she pulled the crying woman into a hug. But you know what will happen if we upset them, Otoki-chan. Do you really want to risk that, Imoto? Misaka reasoned gently in a defeated voice, causing Otoki to tearfully shake her head against her big sister's shoulder, realizing she was right. No, Nei-chan, Otoki answered tearfully, causing Misaka to sigh regretfully as she mentally kicked herself for upsetting her little sister. I'm sorry, Imoto, Misaka apologized again as she gently pushed the woman away, who nodded tearfully. Accepting Misaka's apology, knowing that she hadn't meant it. How was your iwa mochi? Misaka asked in her innkeeper voice, turning to the four staring teens as she plastered a fake smile on her beautiful face, acting like nothing had happened. Line break. We have to do something, Jiraiya stated, looking at his three teammates as they all sat in the room their sensei had paid for. Do what, Jiraiya? Orochimaru questioned. You don't even know what is going on and you are talking about doing something. We could find out. Sensei told us to lay low, Jiraiya asking questions that will only attract attention is not laying low. Naruto, Tsunade, you can't tell me you agree with Orochi-tem? Jiraiya questioned, looking at his best friend and female teammate for help. I'm sorry Jiraiya, but Orochimaru is right, sensei did say lay low. Naruto answered, knowing his pale teammate was right. Acting when their sensei wasn't here would be foolish. Naruto and Orochimaru are both right Jiraiya, we are in Tsuchi no Kuni and we can't go around asking questions that will draw attention to us. Tsunade added, causing Jiraiya to become disappointed as he stared at them in disbelief, wondering how they could just sit and do nothing. Fine, you guys can stay here, but I'm going. Jiraiya said defiantly as he turned to leave the room, but stopped as a pale hand grabbed him. You can't Jiraiya, the three of us are Junin and outtrank you a Chunin, Orochimaru stated, smirking. Knowing the fact Jiraiya was still the only Chunin was a sore point for the white-haired teen. You, Jiraiya growled, ready to attack Orochimaru, who he knew had said that just to piss him off. Naruto sighed, standing up from his position ready to break up the fight that was about to happen like he had done so many times before, but thankfully not having to, as a knock sounded on their door. It's Misaka, can I come in? A hesitant voice said from the other side of the door. Yes, Tsunade answered, glad that someone had stopped the two idiots she had to call her teammates from fighting. You can come in, Tsunade added before the door opened to show a nervous Misaka, who walked in and shut the door behind her. I'm sure you wondering about what happened between me and Otoki. Misaka started nervously she fiddled with her hands, wondering if coming here was a good idea. 3 years ago 2 brothers came to Akitsu and asked for a room in this very inn, Misaka began as she gathered her courage. Their names were Kichimori and Kiyomori. The Sai no Futogo, Tsunade whispered in shock, instantly recognizing the 2 Iwa missing nin who were in several bingo books collectively ranked S-class due to their ruthlessness and prowess when they fought together. Yes, I see you have heard of them, Misaka whispered sadly as she saw the look of recognition on Tsunade's face. Sai no Futogo, Jiraiya repeated, confused, earning a sigh from Orochimaru, who could see why the white-haired teen was still the only Chunin on Team Hiruzen. Rhino twins, Naruto explained. They are brothers wanted for brutally murdering their own teammates and several Iwa shinobi amongst other things. Naruto vaguely continued, not wanting to go into the other graphic things they had done in front of this civilian woman. Yes, but we didn't know that at the time, Misaka explained. They said they were just shinobi passing through, that needed a room, and we believed them. Me, my sister and Genkei believed them. Genkei? Naruto inquired, noticing how Misaka's voice changed when she said the name. The original owner of this inn, Misaka explained, her eyes watering as she remembered the old man who had taken her and Otoki off the streets and raised them as his own. What happened with Kichimori and Kiyomori? Orochimaru asked, not wanting to be insensitive but feeling as though they were drifting off topic. They stayed in this inn for several months, Misaka explained, racking a massive tab as they continuously promised Genkei they would eventually pay for everything when they left. Misaka continued, remembering how the 2 men stayed here for months, eating nearly all the inn's food and drinking nearly all the inn's sake, as claimed they would pay the massive bill when they left. But they didn't, Misaka continued. One day Genkei had enough and decided to confront them, demanding they pay their growing tab even if they weren't yet planning to leave, but Kichimori and Kiyomori refused. They told him that he could either keep demanding they pay or keep his life. What happened? He demanded they pay, since he couldn't afford to let them not to. Misaka replied, silently crying as she remembered what happened as though it was yesterday. They killed him, Misaka continued, her voice breaking. They killed him in front of me and Otoki like it was nothing. Oh, Otoki ran outside screaming for help, Misaka chalked out as she continued. And they killed any and every person who came in trying to stop them. Misaka continued, remembering the blood that painted the floors and walls of the inn. Did they? Tsunade hesitantly asked the weeping Misaka, needing to know if they did the one thing that most kunoichis feared even worse than death. No, Misaka answered, understanding what the blonde wanted to ask, being a woman herself. They didn't, and thankfully still haven't. Still haven't, the 4 teens simultaneously thought in alarm as they caught on to where Misaka's tale was heading and why Otoki said they could help. They are still here, Naruto questioned, stated as he voiced what everyone was thinking. Yes, Misaka venomously answered. After they killed Genkei and anyone else who tried to help him, they said the town was theirs and took residence in Chikara-sama's compound. Misaka explained, remembering how the wealthy man and his family were the 2 brothers' last victims. But why haven't you sent a message to Iwa, to tell the Tsuchikage what happened? Orochimaru asked, wondering why in the past 3 years these town folk hadn't sent one message to a village that was less than 2 days' walk away from here. Telling the Tsuchikage that they had missing nin residing in their town, knowing that the man would be compelled to send hunter nin to take care of them, freeing these people. Because we were afraid. We still are. Masaka answered, lowly, staring at her hands in shame, hating that she was so terrified of 2 men. And because of this. Because of what? Jiraiya questioned before him. Naruto and even Orochimaru blushed as the woman turned around, her back facing them, as she slowly removed the top of her kimono, exposing the top half of her flawless back that was partially covered by her hair. Because of this, Masaka revealed, looking over her shoulder as she pulled aside her hair, exposing a rhino-like burn mark that had been branded on her back by the 2 brothers who had marked every survivor, even the children. They gave this to the rest of us who didn't try to fight them. It reminds us of what happened the last time anyone did. That's why we didn't ask for help, why we are afraid to, because we know what happened the one time anyone tried to stand against them. Masaka explained before shrugging back on the top of her kimono and fixing it. We'll help you, Jiraiya stated, breaking the somber silence that had filled the room. No, please don't, Masaka pleaded, shocking everyone else in the room. I didn't tell you this story so that you could help. I told you this story so you wouldn't, after you understood what you risked happening again by trying to save us. Masaka explained, gesturing at the burn she had shown them. But we will. Jiraiya began, wanting to argue that they didn't care about risking themselves, but was stopped by Masaka, who held up her delicate hand. Please, Jiraiya-san, Masaka pleaded softly, interrupting the boy she could see had good intentions. You trying to save us risks not only yourselves but also us. What happens if you fail? What happens to the rest of us? Masaka asked, causing the room to fall silent as they pondered what she said. I know you are good people, which is why I came to tell this story, because I knew you wouldn't just let go of what happened between me and Otoki-chan. Masaka added, revealing the other part of why she had come. But please don't risk worsening what we have grown accustomed to. Masaka pleaded, knowing the townsfolk had truly grown used to paying the money and handing over the food the 2 brothers demanded in exchange for being left alone and alive. Bu. Jiraiya, she doesn't want our help. There is nothing we can do. Orochimaru stated grimly, knowing there was nothing they could do, even if he hated the situation just as much as his white-haired teammate. Thank you, Masaka said, smiling sadly at the teens. You are all welcome to stay for as long as you like, but all I ask is that you don't do something that may worsen this already terrible situation for us. Masaka pleaded before quietly leaving the room in a grim silence. Line break. Where are you going? A familiar voice asked from behind Naruto, causing him to curse as he froze by the exit, wondering how he had been caught after he managed what he thought to be a stealthy exit of their room, even leaving behind a cage bunshin. Chi-Chi's Tsunade-chan. Naruto nervously stuttered, trying to act innocent as he turned to face his crush, whom he had thought was sleeping like the rest of his team. You are going to try and play hero, aren't you? Tsunade questioned, stated, causing the redhead to gulp as he heard the tone the blonde usually used with Jiraiya when she was about to bash in his skull. Tsunade-chan, IWA. Don't lie to me, Naruto. Tsunade stated firmly, glaring at her teammate, whom she disliked a little less than the other 2, though she would never tell him that. Yes, I was, Naruto admitted, sighing, partially telling the truth since he was actually going to the compound Masaka had mentioned to see what he could find out about Kiyomori and Kichimori before deciding what to do about it. Good, I'm coming with you, Tsunade stated, surprising Naruto. What? Naruto asked, not believing his ears. I am coming with you, Naruto. I want to save these people too, Tsunade stated. And I can't let you die because you want to be an idiot. Tsunade added, although only to herself, not wanting the redhead to know just how deeply worried she was for him. We're coming too, a voice said from behind them, causing Tsunade to lowly curse and Naruto to smile. Jiraiya, Orochimaru. Naruto stated, not that surprised to see Jiraiya but slighted, shocked to see Orochimaru. Naruto. Orochimaru acknowledged, hiding the hurt he felt by the surprised tone he heard in the redhead's voice when he mentioned his name. Even though he had never voiced it, Orochimaru considered Naruto and his teammates, even Jiraiya, his friends. And part of him couldn't help but be affected by the fact Naruto sounded surprised to see him but not Jiraiya. I'm glad all of you guys came. Naruto stated, catching the look in the pale teen's eyes. Especially you, Tsunade-chan. Naruto added lowly without thinking before blushing as he realized what he had said, hoping the blonde hadn't heard him. Let's go. Tsunade huffed, trying to hide the red tint that spread across her cheeks from hearing the teen's words. Hi, let's go, Jiraiya said in too loud a voice, excited that his teammates were now on board with helping the town. Causing the other three to rapidly shush him as they prayed to Kami. The two innkeepers, especially Misaka, were still asleep. Let's go quietly, Naruto whispered, glaring at Jiraiya particularly before the four swiftly left the inn and headed to this compound Misaka had mentioned. Line break. There, Naruto whispered as his eyes caught something with the aid of the moonlight. Is that one of them? Tsunade questioned in disbelief as she and her teammates lay concealed on one of the compound rooftops, scoping it out as they searched for the brothers. Yes, it is, Orochimaru confirmed, understanding his teammates' disbelief. Since the man in front them was large and overweight, unlike the heavily muscled bingo book pictures or descriptions of the Sai no Fudogo. Clearly his years occupying this village has made him lazy and probably weaker too. Both Orochimaru and Naruto similarly thought as they wondered how much the obvious lack of training had affected the man before them and hopefully his brother too. Now what? Jiraiya whispered, glancing at Naruto. Now we kill you, a deep voice said behind the teens, causing them to briefly stiffen before jumping up into action. Kage Bushin no Jutsu, Shadow Clone Jutsu. Naruto called out, sending a clone with Jiraiya and Orochimaru, who jumped down into the compound yard where the one brother stood. As he and Tsunade remained on the roof, turning to face an equally large man who looked near identical to the first. Megan. Banshee no Hime, demonic illusion, Banshee's shriek. Naruto called out, forming a chain of hand signs before casting his high-pitched sound genjutsu, which caused the large man to drop to his knees in pain as he clutched his ears, falling under the illusion. Tsunade now. Naruto called out to the blonde, who didn't have to be told twice as she charged forward to the restrained large man. Her fist. Tsunade used her strength amplifying technique as she sent out a punch to complete the combo she and Naruto had done several times before. What? Impossible! Naruto and Tsunade thought respectively, in shock and alarm as a chubby hand caught the blonde's fist, effortlessly stopping her strength-enhanced punch. Your tricks won't work on me, the large man roared, using his rage to overcome the pain from Naruto's genjutsu as he stood up, not bothering to break the illusion. Leaning back as he yelled, Sai no Keita Hashike, rhinoceros shoulder barge. Before moving at speeds that were impossible for a man his size and merciless, driving his shoulder into a trapped Tsunade's abdomen, whose fist he still held. Ah! Tsunade cried out in agony as she flew back from the man, landing across the rooftop as she clutched her chest in pain. With clone. Doden. Yomi Numa, earth release, swamp of the underworld. Clone Naruto called out, finishing the set of hand seals for his strongest Doden jutsu. Before slamming his hands onto the ground as he turned the surface under the large man he was facing into a swamp, effectively trapping him. Kaden. Enden, fire release, flame bullet. Futon. Daitapa, wind release, great breakthrough. Jiraiya and Orochimaru both thought respectively. Before the whitehead Chunin spat out the large amount of gathered oil in his mouth, igniting it as he created a flame bullet, which doubled in size and speed as a gust of wind from Orochimaru empowered it. Did we get him? Jiraiya asked, wondering if their most powerful combo got the man. No, a voice said behind them, answering Jiraiya's question for the second time tonight. Shit, the three teens cursed, spinning around on guard, earning a chuckle from the large man, who thought it was amusing the way these kids playing ninja turned to face him. Doden. Sai Chikyu no Yoroi, earth release, rhinoceros earth armor. The large man called, using no hand signs as he dropped to all fours, causing the three teens to stare wide-eyed as rock and earth rose from the ground, covering him in a thick protective layer that made makeshift armor before an intimidating rock horn-like projection rose from the top of his earth-covered head. Sai Sato, rhinoceros stampede. The large man on all fours called before charging towards the three teens, who tried dodging but failed as only Jiraiya succeeded, barely moving out the way. Poof! Clone Naruto dispelled as the horn made contact with his chest, pushing aside Orochimaru the instant before it happened. With Naruto. Tsunade. Naruto thought in worry, looking at his teammate who flew back screaming, before beginning a fast chain of hand seals as he prepared to use his most powerful sweetened jutsu that he could utilize without a water source. Suit! Naruto began calling out as he needed chakra in his gut, preparing to shoot the large man with a blast of water. But failing as he charged towards him. I told you your tricks won't work on me. Seishoradachaji, rhinoceros shoulder charge. The large man yelled, crouching as he charged across the rooftop towards Naruto with his frightening speed. Shit! Naruto cursed as he tried sending chakra to his limbs to dodge, but failing to as the large suddenly turned course mid-charge, colliding with the airborne Naruto and sending him flying back across the roof like he had done Tsunade. Arg! Naruto groaned in pain, knowing that something in him had definitely broken despite his impressive durability, before cursing as he got his dispelled clone's memories. What are we going to do? Naruto urgently thought, pushing aside his pain as he stood up, racking his brain for a plan for his outclassed team to execute. Seishoradachaji, rhinoceros shoulder charge. Naruto heard again from behind him, causing him to curse again as he swiftly spun around, preparing to receive the blow but not having to, as he heard two words that instantly caused his body to wash over in relief. Henge. Konoganyo transformation. Adamantine staff. Naruto heard before watching as an extending staff knocked aside the large incoming man. Sensei. Naruto and his teammates thought in relief as they saw the bearded Sarutobi land on the rooftop with his adamantine bow staff. I thought I told you to lay low, Hiruzen voiced, his tone leaking with obvious disappointment, causing Naruto to turn away in shame as he saw his sensei's eyes particularly lingering on him. I'll deal with you later. Hiruzen added a cold edge in his tone before jumping down to take on both brothers at the same time as his injured charges watched. Flashback end. And what happened then? Mikoto asked, completely engrossed by the Yonin's story. Sensei decimated them with just his bow staff, Naruto replied, remembering how odd he, Jiraiya, Tsunade and Orochimaru were as they watched Hiruzen defeat two opponents with just a bow staff after they had failed to do so with their strongest jutsu. He killed them and freed the town before turning his staff on us. Naruto added, grimacing as he remembered how his sensei dealt with them when they got back to Konoha, demanding they spar as they fought him 4-against-1. Mikoto laughed as saw the Yonin grimace, trying to imagine a chibi version of him fighting a one-sided battle against the Hokage with his chibi teammates as the old man dealt with them. She just couldn't imagine it, especially having seen firsthand how powerful the man before her was, failing to imagine him ever weak. What? Mikoto suddenly asked, blushing subconsciously as she broke from her laughter, noticing the Yonin looking at her intently. Nothing. Naruto lied quickly, shaking his head. In truth, he had been watching the Uchiha woman laugh, mesmerized by the sight and sound of it. Having never once seen her like that before, even on their missions. So what happened to Akitsu town? Mikoto asked curiously, wanting the Yonin to get back to his story, knowing it had a point behind. It was liberated, Naruto stated. Even though we left immediately after Sensei killed the two brothers, word of Akitsu town's liberation eventually reached us. Naruto added. Then in the Second Great Shinobi War, Tsunade-chan and I ran into Misaka in Tanzaku town. Naruto continued, his voice dropping sadly as he remembered that eye-opening encounter. Flashback. Outskirts of Tanzaku town. Su, we can't. Naruto mumbled against his wife's lips, protesting as she tried to undo the clasps of his senju armor. Why not? Tsunade whined, breaking their kiss as she pulled back. Because we are out in the open. Naruto stated, gesturing at the woodland around them that they were about to be intimate in. As if that ever stopped us. Tsunade brushed off with a seductive smirk before pulling Naruto back into a kiss, but stopping as the man used his hands to gently block her movement. What is it, Naruto-kun? Tsunade asked, getting slightly pissed. Her and her husband hadn't had some alone time in weeks due to the ongoing war and she wanted him. I don't want to hurt the baby. Naruto admitted lowly in mild embarrassment as he voiced his fear of hurting their growing child whilst they were intimate. Naruto-kun, you won't hurt the baby. Tsunade reassured, smiling lovingly at this amazing man she had married who could be such an idiot at times. But you won't hurt the baby, Tsunade repeated, stopping the man's protest. Even with your impressive size, Naruto-koi, the blonde added, seeing that he was still reluctant as she let her hand slowly reach under his armor before slipping it into the pants of his bodysuit and grasping him. causing the blonde to smirk as her hand felt the undeniable effect she had on him. "You won't hurt our baby," Tsunade reassured, whispering before closing the distance between her and Naruto, not giving the man a chance to further protest as she silenced him with a heated kiss. "Wait," Naruto whispered breathlessly, pulling away from the kiss, causing the blonde to curse again as she wondered what it was now. "We are still in the open," Naruto stated, taking his wife's hand before shining them both into the nearby Tanzaku town. Line break. Tanzaku Town Inn. "Welcome, I'm Misaka, and how may I help you?" A voice drunkenly greeted as Naruto and Tsunade entered the inn they had decided to stay in during the one day they had managed to get together away from the war. "Misaka," Tsunade and Naruto whispered in unison as they stared in shock at the woman before them. "What happened?" Tsunade whispered as she looked at the once beautiful woman who now looked years over what the blonde suspected to be her age, missing an arm with an ugly scar across her face. "You," Misaka growled venomously, instantly recognizing two of the 5 people she had hated over the years. Despite them having grown older, Misaka could never have forgotten their faces. "You did this," Misaka answered, her once angelic voice dripping with venom as she noticed the blonde looking at the area that once had her now missing arm. "You did this. You got Otoki killed." "Otoki," Tsunade repeated in shock and sadness, hearing the lovely woman had died. "Misaka, what happened?" Naruto questioned, not knowing why the woman was blaming them after their sensei had liberated Akitsu town. "I told you not to free us," Misaka roared venomously as she lunged across the counter she stood behind, throwing her one fist out to the red-haired man before her. "Misaka, what happened?" Naruto repeated, effortlessly catching the drunk woman's fist. "I asked you not to save us, why did you save us?" Misaka asked tearfully as she failed to retract her trapped fist from Naruto's hand. "Because you were living under the tyranny of 2 murderers and we had to free you," Tsunade answered, not knowing why this woman was acting like this. "Well, after you so nobly freed us, word got out about what you did," Misaka explained venomously, glaring at the blonde who thought she was a hero. "Then she came. She butchered everyone, demanding to know who took her revenge from her and killed the bastards who took her family." "Who? Does it matter?" Misaka yelled angrily. "She killed Otoki and rest of the town because you 4 decided to save us." Naruto and Tsunade both looked away, ashamed as they realized the consequence of their actions. Even from the woman's vague explanation they got the picture of what had happened. A woman with a vendetta against Kiyomori and Kichimori killed the townsfolk where the 2 brothers died. Wanting to know who saved them, but the townspeople not knowing since Team Hiruzen left before the people could even know who did it. Misaka W. Tsunade began wanting to apologize but was stopped by a hard glare as the woman venomously turned to her. "Otoki-chan, and I knew it was you. She died believing you saved us, but you didn't. You just condemned our town to death by doing the one thing I begged you not to. Now get out, I don't want to hear your apologizes." Flashback end. Naruto sighed sadly as he remembered that day. He never thought their actions would have such consequences. "Tsunade-chan and I were so ashamed of what we had inadvertently done that we couldn't even tell our teammates," Naruto added, knowing that till this day no one from Team Hiruzen knew the truth besides him and his wife. "Did you find out who the woman was?" Mikoto questioned quietly as she saw the look of regret in the Yonin's eyes. "No," Naruto answered. "We tried to, but with the war we just couldn't." Naruto added, wondering now as he thought about it if Tsunade had specifically chosen Tanzaku town in her grief-filled state 11 years ago because of what happened with Misaka there. "Look, Mikoto, I know you have good intentions like we did, and I know you want to go save them," Naruto continued, hoping the Uchiha understood now why he wanted the town to fight Gato themselves. "But we don't know what the effects might be if we just go play hero. Yes, it's unlikely for a brutal nin to go do to Nami no Kuni what happened in Akitsu if we kill Gato. But our actions might have unforeseen consequences. By us stopping the townsfolk from even trying to save themselves, how do we know that the next time another Gato comes around they won't just wait for another hero to come along, instead of doing something themselves? And what happens if that time there is no Mikoto Uchiha or Naruto Uzumaki Senju to save them?" Naruto questioned, causing Mikoto to frown conflicted as she began seeing his point of letting Tsune try rally the town and face Gato alone first instead of swooping in and fighting their fight for them, possibly weakening the town if such a thing happened again in the future. And if they ask for help or if Tsunami hears they failed. Mikoto questioned, wanting to know what the Yonin would do then. Then we will help them. Naruto answered, praying to Kami though that the same result as what happened in Akitsu by him helping those people won't happen in Nami no Kuni. Fine, Mikoto agreed, deciding to trust the man, like she always had on their missions before, making her way to the woman and child to tell them it was time to go. Line break. Konoha, Shinobi Academy. Toka sighed as she stood waiting outside the academy. She knew her grandmother was on her way, but she would have preferred having her here now so she wouldn't have to deal with these annoying civilians. Senju-sama, how was your day at the academy? A civilian man questioned his daughter next to him, whom Toka remembered from class but couldn't quite remember her name. It was boring, Toka muttered under her breath, causing the man to chuckle as he thought she was joking. Senju-sama, I was wondering, where is your grandfather? A civilian woman asked, shamelessly blushing as she and several other civilians came over to talk to Toka. Yes, I haven't seen him come with you to the academy lately, another civilian woman added, also blushing, knowing she would have noticed the handsome man that sometimes brought Toka to the academy but having not seen him the last couple of days. He's on mission, Toka informed, earning gasps and curious looks from the surrounding civilians who wanted to know all about the powerful Yonin's mission. What mission? I'm sure it's dangerous. Has he gone to fight a whole village? Will he be okay? The civilians all broke out together, causing Toka to growl as they all at once repeatedly threw questions and statements at her. I'm sure Toka-san doesn't know what Naruto-sama's mission is. Iruka interrupted, breaking the civilians from their questioning frenzy as he grabbed the girl's hand and pulled her away before any of the civilians could protest. Thank you, Iruka-sensei, Toka said as she and Iruka stopped away from the civilians. It's fine, Toka, Iruka reassured, smiling at the girl whose position had changed in class since he stopped neglecting her, moving from dead last to the top half, though he suspected the impressive change also had something to do with the girl's grandparents. Where's your grandmother, Toka? Iruka asked, knowing that either both her grandparents or at least one of them always picked her up and dropped her off. She on her way to Ibeo, Toka said, smiling at the man whom had changed in a way Toka liked since the announcement, unlike most of the rest. Iruka, unlike a bulk of the population in Konoha, had apologized to Toka for his earlier treatment and just treated her like a normal person. The majority of the rest, however, hadn't apologized, and though they had changed, it irked Toka the way they had. Calling her Senju-sama, or Namikaze-sama, constantly reminding Toka that the only reason they were nice to her was because of what she was, not who she was. Reminding her that if she wasn't a Senju or the fourth's daughter, they would still be calling her demon, and treating her the way they were before. Toka-chan, Toka heard from behind her, causing her to smile as she turned to face her grandmother. Bachan, you are here, Ibeo, Toka said excitedly, said as she ran to her grandmother and hugged before pulling away as she remembered something. Bachan, we don't have to train today, do we? Toka asked, whining, not wanting to training in chakra control exercises or go through a boring theory lecture the day her Ojiazan was coming back. No, Tsunade replied, feeling slightly offended that Toka had an obvious irking for her lessons that may be boring but were necessary for what her and Naruto planned to teach her. Your Ojiazan is coming back and I'm planning on making ramen. Yada, Toka said excitedly, drooling at the thought of a large bowl of her Bachan steaming ramen that she loved but was only limited to having 4 times a week. Tsunade laughed as she watched her granddaughter. She knew the girl loved her ramen and always wanted to have it just like both Kushina and Naruto. But looking at Toka now, Tsunade could see the girl looked healthier and taller, even if it was just by a bit, and that told the laughing blonde she had made the right call. Thank you, Tsunade said, smiling appreciatively at Iruka, who just waved her off, saying it was nothing. Toka smiled as she and Tsunade made their way to the Senju compound. She was getting ramen tonight and didn't have to train, which made the girl happy. Don't get her wrong, Toka loved training and getting stronger, but she had been expecting to be learning how to blow out flaming dragons by now like her Ojiazan had. But instead she was learning chakra control and theory from her grandmother, with taijutsu and shuriken jutsu from her grandfather. Thinking of her grandfather, Toka couldn't help but smile wider, remembering his promise during one of their training sessions. Flashback. Relax your stance more, Toka, Naruto said in his sensei voice as he trained Toka in the taijutsu style his mother and father had taught him. It had no actual name, but most Senju and some Uzumaki used it since it focused on unpredictability, which worked well against dojutsu like the Sharingan and against taijutsu experts who may pick up patterns of the stance you are using. Hi sensei, Toka said, doing exactly as her grandfather asked as she relaxed her stance before going through the katas he had shown her. Very good Toka-chan, Naruto voiced, smiling proudly at his granddaughter as he saw her perfectly complete the katas. Thanks Ojiazan, Toka said, earning a hard flick to her forehead. Oh, what was that for? The girl whined as she rubbed her head. What have I told you to call me when we are in training? Naruto questioned, reminding Toka that when they trained he was her sensei, not her grandfather. But you called me Toka-chan Datbeo. Toka protested loudly, earning a slightly embarrassed look from Naruto, who remembered how he had told her he would only call her Toka in their training sessions and not Toka-chan. She's right, Tsunade said, laughing from the sidelines as she watched her granddaughter put her husband in his place. Moving on, Naruto said, shooting his wife a betrayed look as he promised himself to get her back for that tonight. Kunai throwing, Naruto announced, earning a groan from Toka, who thought her grandfather was going to say jutsu instead of boring kunai throwing. Toka, what have I told you about the importance of the basics? Naruto asked, hearing his granddaughter's protest. But OJIIOWWW. But sensei, if you teach me how to turn one kunai into 1,000 like you did, I wouldn't have to aim properly since I won't be able to miss the target with all those kunai. Toka pointed out, wanted her Ojiazan to show the first jutsu he used in his spar. You're right Toka, Naruto partially agreed, sighing as he understood where his granddaughter was coming from and the logic behind her words. So you going to teach me the jutsu TT Ibeo? Toka said excitedly, getting a chance to finally learn a cool jutsu. No, Naruto stated, earning protests from Toka, who whined, saying he just said she was right. Because Toka, you won't always have the time to perform the jutsu, and even if you do, the jutsu is very chakra taxing, which makes it useless if you are low on your chakra reserves. Naruto continued, knowing his granddaughter knew about chakra reserves and exhaustion, having covered it with Tsunade previously. And the jutsu is very hard to use when you enemies are among allies. Naruto added, reciting what Hiruzen had said when he taught him and Orochimaru the jutsu. Bu. Toka, watch. Naruto cut off his granddaughter, knowing that she was a more visual and tactile learning than a verbal one. And that lecturing her all day would not get his point across. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu, Shadow Clone Jutsu, Naruto whispered, using the jutsu Tsunade had banned their granddaughter from using until she improved her chakra control. U5, Naruto said, pointing at 5 of his 10 clones. You know what to do? Naruto questioned, earning nods from the clones who knew what to do since they had their boss's memory before they moved forward to do what their boss wanted. Toka, I want to watch, Naruto said, gesturing at his clones as 4 of them hanged and 1 remained the same. If those 4 kunoichi were my enemies. Naruto began gesturing at the 4 who had hanged into only kunoichi to make the demonstration clearer. And my clone was my ally, Naruto continued, pausing as he pointed at his unhinged clone. I wouldn't be able to use the jutsu, Naruto explained, making a point to throw 1 kunai before multiplying it into 50. Dispelling all his clones, even his unhinged one, as the 50 kunai rained down on all of them. But I would be able to use kunai throwing, Naruto stated, sending the second batch of 5 Bunshin forward, who copied the first 5 with 4 of them hanged and 1 of them not. Watch, Naruto said firmly, grabbing 2 kunai in each hand before dispelling the hanged ones as he tossed the kunai, leaving behind his 1 unhinged clone. I understand Ojiazan, Toka begrudgingly admitted as she saw her grandfather's point and the disadvantage of using the jutsu. I know you want to get strong, Toka-chan, Naruto said, not bothering to flick his granddaughter's forehead as he kneeled in front of her. And I know you think you need flashy jutsu for that, Naruto continued, knowing that just like him when he was young, that's what the girl thought. But basics, Toka-chan, that's the first step to making you strong, they build your foundation, Naruto added. And I promise after we are done with the basics I'll show you some of the cool jutsu you saw. Naruto promised, earning a grin from Toka, who instantly grew excited at the mere thought of learning the jutsu her grandfather had used during his spar. You promise? Toka questioned, barely containing her excitement. I promise. Yada, I am going to be so cool, Datbeo. Toka yelled eagerly, earning a laugh from Naruto and Tsunade, who came over. But only after you also complete your chakra control exercises, Tsunade added, stopping next to Naruto. Bachan. Toka whined, knowing she struggled with those exercises. No complaining, Toka, or else I will flick your forehead, Naruto said firmly, entering his sensei mode again. Now back to kunai throwing. Naruto added, holding out a dulled kunai for Toka to take. Hi sensei, Toka said, taking the kunai as she listened to her Ojiazan on how to properly throw it. Flashback end. Bachan, what time is Ojiazan coming home? Toka questioned, wanting to know when she would see her grandfather who had been away for the past few days. Before dinner, Tsunade promised, remembering the message Naruto sent via summon that him and Mikoto were escorting two civilians they met on their way to Konoha, forcing the two to slow down their pace. Toka smiled as she heard this. She truly enjoyed ramen more when she ate it with her grandparents, and tonight she would get that chance. Line break. Senju compound. Naruto smiled as he entered the Senju compound. He had just taken Tsunami and Inari to see the Hokage. As he and Mikoto reported the success of their mission to the old man before explaining Tsunami and her son's predicament. The Hokage had been kind enough to welcome them and offer a small apartment for them to stay free of charge until Tsume sent word it was safe for them to return. Tsunami had at first been reluctant to accept such generosity, but at both Naruto and the Hokage's insistence she had accepted. Ojiazan. Naruto heard the instant he entered his home before nearly being knocked over by Toka, who hugged him. Toka-chan, Naruto said warmly, embracing the girl. How was the mission? Toka asked, wanted her Ojiazan to describe one of his cool missions like he always did when he came home. It was fine, Toka-chan, Naruto said, earning a disappointed look from Toka, causing the man to chuckle as he knew what she wanted to hear. I'll tell you later, Toka, Naruto promised. But first I have to see your Bachan. She's in the kitchen making ramen. Toka said excitedly, her good mood returning. She's making ramen, Naruto repeated, sharing a grin with Toka, who could see her Ojiazan shared her excitement. But only one bowl for both of you, a voice said behind the two, causing them to both groan as they turned to face Tsunade. Oh come on Susu, I'm sure there are ways I can persuade you to give us more than one. Naruto whispered huskily, drawing Tsunade into his arms. Not in front of Toka, there aren't, Tsunade whispered back, glancing at their granddaughter as she barely resisted the urge to let Naruto persuade her, having been away from his arms the past 2 days. Fine, Naruto muttered, sighing as he let his wife go. Since I'm feeling generous, you two can have 2 bowls, Tsunade announced, earning smiles from both Uzumaki. But only if you persuade me later, Tsunade added lowly so only Naruto could hear. Make it 3 and you have a deal, Naruto bargained, smirking, earning a scoff from Tsunade, who knew very well even if she gave him no ramen the man would still be persuading her tonight. Fine, Tsunade agreed before placing a linger kiss on Naruto's lips to welcome him back, having truly missed him. Dinner is ready, Tsunade announced, pulling back before she left the room with the 2 hungry Uzumaki following. Line break. Uchiha compound. Mikoto sighed as her shoulders sagged in sadness entering the compound. She would be lying if she said she was happy to be home, since she was anything but. In the past few months Mikoto had only been anywhere near remotely happy when she was outside of the village with Naruto. Thinking of the Yanin, Mikoto sighed, but this time in happiness, thinking of the man who had made her laugh today for the first time in 3 years since the night of the massacre. A part of her knew the excitement she felt and the way her heart fluttered each time Naruto and her went for their weekly 2 to 3 day missions was inappropriate. But Mikoto couldn't help it, she found herself counting down the seconds until their next mission each time she came home. What that meant the Uchiha didn't want to look deep into, dismissing it as her just looking forward to the time she got to spend with the only person she could consider a friend in the whole of Konoha, since her and Tsume were still at odds. Mikoto, a cold voice said as she entered her home. I thought we agreed you would stop going on these missions, Fugaku said, stepping out from the shadows as he stood in front of his wife, glaring down at her with his Sharingan. You ordered me to, Fugaku. We did not agree, Mikoto shoot back in an equally icy tone as she activated her own Sharingan, not believing this was the man she had once loved and might still do. You cannot order me around, Fugaku, Mikoto added before moving past her husband to make her way to one of the guest rooms that she had moved into. You are my wife and you do not get to call me that, Mikoto interrupted angrily as rounded on the Uchiha man. Until you start treating me as your wife you do not get to call me that, the Uchiha woman repeated before turning back around and continuing to her room. Praying to Kami the next days would fly by so her and Naruto could go on their next mission. Line break. Senju compound. NN Naruto W wait. Tsunade moaned as her husband left a hot trail of burning kisses down her neck. They had said goodnight to Toka and put her to bed. And were about to begin their lovemaking, but the blonde had something to say before she lost the ability to form complete sentences. What's wrong, Harem? Naruto asked, raising his head from the blonde's neck as he looked down at her. I'm pregnant, Tsunade informed nervously as she closely watched her husband. Pregnant? Naruto stuttered as he processed what he heard. You're pregnant? Naruto questioned, needing confirmation that he hadn't heard wrong. Yes, I'm pregnant, Tsunade confirmed, fearfully waiting for the man's reaction before smiling as she saw his eyes glinting. You're pregnant, Naruto said happily before kissing his wife. Have you told Toka? Have you told anyone? Naruto asked, breaking their kiss, causing Tsunade to laugh happily as she was infected by the man's contagious excitement. Yes, Naruto Koi, I'm pregnant, but I haven't told Toka or anyone besides Shizune, who confirmed the test. I wanted us to do it together, Tsunade explained, earning a grateful look from the man as he looked down at his breathtaking wife. Now go back to doing what you were doing, or are you afraid to hurt the baby? Tsunade playfully teased as she quoted what Naruto said all those years ago outside of Tanzaku town. Earning an unamused look from Naruto, who could see his wife was clearly mocking him, before he brought his lips back down to hers, wanting to show her just how much he loved her and how unafraid he was this time round.